Hey everyone, welcome to GameFace episode 159 on Sifted Games at Sifted.net. It is Friday night. Hope you guys are primed for a great weekend. Hope you're kicking your feet up, ready to get past the work week, and ready to play some great video games this weekend. We're going to send you off into that weekend, I believe, with a really good show. We have a ton of topics in this week's episode. It's going to be a little bit like the ADD episode of GameFace. We're not going to spend a ton of time on any topic because we got a lot to get to. We are going to talk about Devil May Cry 5, which just came out today. Matt and I have both been playing it, so we're going to get to that. Well, Matt hasn't played much of it. I've played a lot of it. So we'll be talking about that. We're going to talk about some Nintendo news. I think we got every platform in the show, so there's something for everybody in this week's episode. A couple housekeeping things before we get going. The new Patreon has launched. It is out there. You're seeing right now the list of people below who pledged $30 or more. I have to say, it's the smallest list we've ever had. So a lot of people, when we launched our new Patreon, actually bailed, which is not encouraging for the new Patreon. In fact, some people who had been on the list that you're seeing right now since we launched our Patreon left. So I don't know what that means. I don't know if people hate our new Patreon or what. Also, a note to some of you guys, there was a lot of you this month for whatever where your payment was declined. You guys pledged, but then for whatever reason, your credit card or your PayPal account just didn't take the charge. So if you're missing your name along the bottom and you're like, wait, I'm still pledging at that level, it's probably because your payment was declined. So go have a look at Patreon if that's the case. If you guys are watching this on YouTube, thanks for checking us out. If you aren't going to be able to help us at our Patreon, which I hope you would, patreon.com/sifted, even $1 a month makes a big difference. If you can't do that, though, we have Twitch Prime. You can give us a free $2.50 every month if you're an Amazon Prime member. Directions are down below. We really appreciate it. And one thing we are doing on YouTube is at the top of every description now, we have a link where you literally just have to click that link, and it takes you to the page where you have to click one more time to give us $2.50. We're trying to make it so easy for you guys. So if you've already linked your Twitch Prime or your Twitch and Amazon Prime accounts, there's a link there right now. It's one click to give us $2.50. Please do it. We'd really appreciate it. So anyway, got a big show. I know you guys have a weekend you're trying to get to. We don't want to take up a ton of your time, so let's just get straight to it. Matt, is there going to be an E3 in 5 years?
It might just be like two guys in a sport coat having like
two guys sharing one sport coat.
Yeah, having a power lunch at the Marriott. I think that might be E3 2025.
It's starting to look that way. So this week, EA announced that it is not doing an E3 press conference. It's still going to be there and do its EA Play thing, but there's no press conference. Mm-hmm. Now, I think there are probably a couple reasons this could be. I think the first one is
nothing.
They got nothing.
That's game one.
I think that's probably why.
Which explains why last Jedi Fallen Order is being shown off at Star Wars Celebration.
April 13th, I believe. Yeah, so we're going to get to see Respawn's Star Wars game in just like a month, which is exciting. But
and considering no E3 press conference, it means we're probably going to see a pretty good chunk of it.
Yeah. So I agree. I think that the bulk of it is that EA just looked at its lineup and was like, well, we can show all our sports games again.
Yeah.
Or show nothing.
Yeah. Because what you got Jedi and you got your sports games, and you could probably push some new mobile thing like that Command & Conquer thing last year.
But that's been a nightmare.
And I don't know. What else are you going to talk about? Like Apex Legends?
I think the other part of it, too, is that EA's press conferences have been a disaster for the last 2 years in a row. There's been at least one part of its press conference at E3 that people have ultimately railed on for weeks and weeks after it was over.
Yeah, and it's also just sort of one of the things where it's like the last few years has really sort of highlighted how thin EA's catalog is. And it's like, it's the one time a year I hear about Plants vs. Zombies again.
Yeah.
You know, it's just sort of like...
Or The Sims.
Yeah, because they're not holding anything back because they're just throwing everything they got out there, and most of what they got is kind of,
Yeah.
You know, they're not a robust. They don't have a robust variety of things they put out regularly anymore. Like they used to have, the old EA lineup. You got the sports, but you also got the Need for Speed. You got a racer. You got a shooter here. You got maybe another online game. You got a smaller fun thing. You got a Sims game. You got a you got whatever Respawn's working on. I got robots with Titanfall. He's like, it was a mix of things, and now it's just sort of like the same things over and over again as they slowly put more and more bullets into the heads of developers they bought and then had one failure, and then instead of cultivating the talent they had and the experience in these developers that they paid huge amounts of money for because of their pedigree that's existed as an independent entity in the industry for years and years, they just sort of shut them down. You sound like the Micro
Machines guy.
They sort of shut them down and let them die, and then you do that often enough and you don't have any fucking games left.
Yeah, one thing I've noticed with EA is we've seen with Activision is starting to shift its strategy a little bit. Where, I mean, it's publishing Sekiro and a couple other games that aren't part of its typical yearly or biannual release schedule.
Anything that's not COD is sort of shocking from Activision.
But we're not seeing EA do that. No. EA had an era where it was like that, when you got games like Dante's Inferno, and some people may argue, hey, maybe that was a bad EA that shouldn't come back.
Yeah.
But when you can't have,
but at
when
least
you're
they
one of
let
the
that happen sometimes. Right. You got a Dante's Inferno or a Dead Space or like a Mirror's Edge or like they were experimenting here and there.
When you're one of the biggest publishers in the industry and you don't have enough material and content to have an E3 press conference, something's flying off the rails. And I think we already know Star Wars is flying off the rails because we haven't got a new game for that for what now, 15 months?
Yeah.
Around there?
It'll be 2 years by the time we get to Fallen Jedi.
Yeah, it'll be 2 years without a Star Wars game, so that's hurt EA big time.
It was 2 years before Battlefront 2 as well.
Right.
Just it was the same game.
Yeah, and it was the same. Basically just DLC.
Yeah, and they're still updating Battlefront 2. I had to do it down, but it's like there's that thing. And honestly, like you're hitting a thing, and I know it's an Anthem problem too, but it's like where I was like, oh, I wonder what the update was. Probably like Count Dooku or whatever the hell. And I'm like, oh, I could look at it, but it means sitting through load screens for like 10 minutes to load up Battlefront 2 and probably play one round. I'm just like, nah.
Yeah.
I got it for $9. Who cares? Like, it's a weird situation you're in where I'm like, I don't think I'm gonna bother starting up the Star Wars thing to look at the new content. It's like that doesn't happen often.
Ever. So what do you think this means for E3 on a bigger scale, on a grand scale?
Well, I mean, E3,
because EA did this first.
EA was already out of it,
right? But look, EA did this first, and we talked about it way back when, and we said we wouldn't be surprised if we see other publishers following suit, and we were right. We've seen at least 3 or 4 big publishers leave the show floor, not do a press. There's no press conference from Sony this year. No press conference from EA this year.
Microsoft's had its off-site presence for at least last year or 2 years.
2 years. Nintendo doesn't really do a press conference. It does a pre-produced video every year.
Nintendo's going to be the whole floor in a couple of years.
It might be, unless it bails too.
Which it probably would.
And is that what's going to happen? Is that where we are at this point? Is this what's going to happen to E3? Is it going to become irrelevant? I mean, I think now we have to say Gamescom is the most important conference of the year.
If you're a fan of video games, yeah, I don't know if that's true if you're a business person.
Right.
I think E3 will always be the heart of the business year for the industry,
which most people don't even realize.
Which all happens upstairs.
Right. People don't even like those stairs you're seeing right there. You go up those stairs and there's meeting rooms, and that's where a bunch of stuff happens at E3 that most people don't even know about. Publishing deals. Signing developers,
but it's why E3 exists.
It is. That's the original reason why it existed in the first place. Yeah.
And I mean, yeah, the time may come when Nintendo's not on the floor, or Sony's. But here, I'll tell you this much: Sony's business people are still up those stairs.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's Sony's not going in the sense that they're not going to have anything to show us as sort of civilians on the floor, but Sony's still there in the business sense. And so there could come a time when the reason it's called E3 is the last word is Expo, begins with
right.
E. Expo usually in a business sense, in an industry expo, you're doing this sort of floor booth thing where you're showing off your work. It's usually not this fancy. Even 20 years ago, E3's show floor was a different beast from your average industry expo. I mean, obviously, it's more exciting than the dental tech expo. Because that's usually, I believe that is usually the expo that happens the week before is a yearly dental technology expo.
Right.
Where you just have all the water picks you could ever want to demo all on the floor there. But this thing, that's ballooned into what it is to us because, like, a bunch of us used to either cover it or sneak into it. And like it became sort of the touchstone sort of big event, Christmas in June for, as Tim Rogers would put it, game likers. And I love that. I love that.
I'm a game liker.
Game liker, because it almost sounds like game liquor, and on the other end of the spectrum, like it clearly just says all it means is you like games,
and it keeps me from having to say gamer, which I hate. So I'll take it.
I don't prefer that either.
I mean, so here's the big question, though.
He also says game touchers, which is I also like that. I have to say, I have gotten very into Tim Rogers and his videos.
After years and years of not caring.
I couldn't stand him when he was writing in text in the early 2000s. It was all weird and long and all about him, and like it sounded so pretentious. But when he like reads it out loud with this weird sort of self-effacing, sarcastic tone, it just works.
It works, yeah.
And it is. Like he does like 40 minutes on like Dragon Quest 11, and I watched the whole damn thing. Like it was he's very entertaining.
Yeah, we'll have to start checking that and start curating it to
for sure,
Sifted.
For sure.
But so here's the thing, though.
My surprise of the year
is E3 more about press conferences, and look, I realize these two things kind of go hand in hand. Is it more about the press conferences, or is it more about the announcements? Because that to me is the thing that I think E3 will keep. Mm-hmm. Even after it starts to become irrelevant.
Yeah, even if you don't even have a show floor anymore, people are still going to announce their new business directions and their new products that they need to show to these people. And
because that's where Gamescom is behind. Gamescom is bigger, better for consumers, more games, but it's also...
But it's not at the right time of the year.
It's a has-been.
Yeah.
It's a lot of the stuff that we saw at E3. They're not announcing much stuff at Gamescom, but they're giving the consumer access to it.
If E3 really sort of dwindles back down to more of a business conference, in the way like say GDC is in a sense, or GDC is sort of like GDC is a big deal if you're a game developer.
Yeah.
But we don't really pay a lot of attention to it because there's not a lot of announcements and there's not a lot of new reveals on the floor or anything like that.
Yeah.
It is a very interesting conference to go to if you're interested in that aspect of things, and it's astoundingly good for networking. But I could see I could see it be. I don't know where that conjugation came from. I could see it become a thing where like E3 is more of like the business side of things, and you get a lot of announcements, and then Gamescom is the first time we really see these things in depth and get like non-suit people to get their hands on things. It'd be more of almost more where the press gets to really play with stuff, and E3 would be more of a reporting on the announcements situation.
Now, another thing about E3 that people who don't work in the industry or haven't worked in journalism may not realize is that E3 is also a big event for outlets. So every year you're trying to get sponsorships for all your content all year, and most deals that you lock down are like for $50,000 to do a couple videos for a game the week before it comes out. E3 is where you get the big deals. It's where you talk to potential sponsors and you say, hey, we'll put your logo in our graphics package. It will be, if we have a stage live on the show floor, we'll have signage that has Mountain Dew on it or what. Those deals you make $1 million, $500,000. So it's kind of this little cottage industry part of E3 that a lot of people don't understand. That to me would be in jeopardy.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have the bombastic event for people to go to, outlets are going to be in trouble. Because literally,
you're probably not going to see like GameSpot having their big giant like booth on the floor. Where I remember for a few of the years it was like almost like a big fishbowl, and you could see everybody working in there all 3 days. It was just a constant hive of activity.
We would make a quarter of our revenue at E3 every year at Game Trailers. So whatever we made for the year, divide it by a quarter, 25%, and that is what we would make just at E3. If you lose,
a big chunk of G4's like yearly too.
Yeah, if you lose a quarter of your revenue as a publication in 2019, you're screwed. You're gone. You're done. That's your whole profit margin times like 5.
Although at the same time, it's like, imagine if like, I don't know, Imagine if like CNN made a quarter of their revenue off like the Republican primary convention.
Right. I mean, it's
how,
kind of the
how
same
much
thing.
how much would you trust coverage of that?
Right.
You know,
it's
like,
true. Yeah.
It is a nice illustration of how like the media that cover games is basically just a part of the PR wing.
Well, one thing I would say though is
that's
the E3 sponsors.
The model doesn't. The money model is broken.
Yeah, but the E3, for us at least, the E3 sponsors weren't the video game industry. That was the one time in the year where we got other industries to come in. So we would get like a Mountain Dew, or we would get a Gillette, or we would get an Axe body spray, or whatever.
I do associate those with the game industry, though.
Yeah,
like, because of that.
I've dealt with them for years, because those are, when you work at an outlet, those are the companies that you target, because they're trying to hit the 13 to 35-year-old male so that they can get that guy to start using Gillette razors at 13, and then he uses them for the rest of his life. Or choose their deodorant, and that's the deodorant that they use for the rest of it. So, and this is the one event where you could get those people. So I would go into meetings because I also worked for Spike, and a big problem for us always was I go to these meetings with sponsors, and we'd have Spike, and we'd have GT. And of course, even though I worked for both, my heart was in game trailers, so I always tried to push the marketing deals over to game trailers, and it was a very hard sell. You could get them to buy anything on Spike, anything. The dumbest idea I could come up with, they'd sell it for $200,000. I would come up, and my team would come up with genius ideas for E3, like 10 of them, and we'd sell like 2 or 3. Still, that was enough to generate a quarter of our revenue for the year. So if E3 goes down, it's not just, oh, boo-hoo, I miss E3 and I miss taking off work for a couple of days to watch all the... There are serious consequences across the board, across the entire industry for E3 going down. Now, could something spring up that could take its place? Are there other more smaller events that can fill the void? It's hard to get a sponsor to sponsor your coverage of PSX. Like, it just is. They're like, so what's the deal? It's only Sony? Why would we want to get it on that? We want to hit everybody. So these smaller events, you can say...
It was easier to sell packs than it was for PSX.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Or even when they did the Xbox thing for those few years.
Yeah.
That was a tough sell, unless you got Microsoft to basically help you.
Right, yeah.
Which is a conflict of interest.
Right, so the XO events, all that stuff. Yeah, it's hard to get sponsorships for that kind of stuff. So as someone who's been in this industry for a long time, dealt with those high-level conversations, dealt with the advertising and marketing teams, the agencies for years and years, I could see like a press apocalypse coming for if E3 goes away or loses relevance to the point where sponsors don't want to deal with the outlets anymore or don't want to sponsor the outlets anymore. And I realize this is kind of inside baseball stuff. I'm sorry if I'm boring you guys with kind of the insider stuff of what it's like to run a website. I think some of you guys do want to hear that stuff. But I think in this particular case, in this particular story, it's extremely relevant. And we actually took questions from people on the website this week. So there's a thread in Sifton's forums. So I realize a lot of you guys who watch the show, in fact, the vast majority of people who watch the show watch the archive, and they've been kind of wondering how they can get in and ask questions at the end of the show. So there's a thread in the general gaming forum on Sifted right now. So if you ever want to ask questions for the show that we'll answer at the end of the show and you can't make the live stream, you can hit that thread up, and we're actually going to answer some from that later on in the show. And one of the questions is kind of related to this, at least a little bit tangentially. So it's not good. This is like the third year in a row that we've seen, at least in my opinion, the relevance of E3 dwindling. I
mean, I don't think this changes much, really. It's just, EA not doing something is just like EA's already not doing things. So, like, it would be more, if like Microsoft pulled out of a press conference, that would be a bigger deal to me. EA not doing something is more of an indication of the state of EA than the state of E3. But the fact that EA is not sort of prioritizing it and finding a way to do it is a comment, I think, on how they know that while it's not ideal, it's also not going to torpedo them. It's not the end of the world.
Because in the past they've had weak lineups and they've
done it anyway.
They did it anyway. Now I think they're to the point where they look at the value of E3 and they're like, you know what? It's not worth doing it anyway.
Yeah, let's
anymore.
not kill ourselves over this. Yeah. Let's just ride it out.
It's interesting. And I mean, a big part of it too, I think, is influencers and how, they launched Apex Legends basically with influencers, and they're probably like, well, crap.
That worked.
That worked.
We got to stop bringing them on to do the press conference and just let them make money for us.
Exactly. And I think part of that is kind of shifting the sands a little bit as well. So we're in a new frontier. E3 isn't back to the Santa Monica version of 2006 yet, thank God.
No, hopefully never. But like, I mean, I would rather see it like fade away before it became that again.
Yeah.
That was just sort of.
But I think that's what we're seeing right now, though, is E3
bit.
fading away.
But that E3, like, you know, like I said, the core of what it is always going to be there. Like that, you know, everything else is just sort of like has sprung up around it. You know, like if you know, E3 is not dead if. You know, the spectacle goes away, because that's not what E3 is at its core. It just becomes something that we wouldn't want to be at because we don't have anything to do there.
I wonder, too, if E3 gets to a certain point, if this shoulder programming that these publishers are doing around it also goes away. So what happens when... Because we've talked about how we think it's shady that EA is basically using E3 to get all the journalists in town and get them to come over to their little shindig or whatever. What happens when, because these people have left E3, there's no E3 anymore?
Well,
do they still do the thing? Like,
I think it depends how profitable it is just with the general public coming.
Yeah.
Because, like, you know, and I don't know what the numbers are for the ESA either in terms of tickets sold to E3. Itself, I mean, that could just keep some. But you know, they tried to do that with E-for-All back in back 10 years ago, and that didn't. It
was a disaster.
Didn't hold out because no one wanted to put the effort into bringing anything to it. It became something much more akin to the dental technology show.
It did, yeah.
Frankly, like
it was embarrassing.
Yeah,
I went to it once, and I was like, "Oh my gosh!"
I went to the second one, the second year. Wade, our boss, sent me and Blair Herter to it with a camera crew, and he basically just said, just come back with something. Like, get it's like, here we have an appointment with this, an appointment with that. Like they're buddies. Like, you know, it was the I can't remember the name of it, but it was like the vest you wore that punched you in the chest when you got shot.
Oh,
you remember that?
The impact.
It was like,
what was it called?
It began with an I. You're right.
Yeah.
It was like an impactor, like the immersifier. Or
it was basically this bulletproof. It looked like a bulletproof vest. You strapped on, and if you got shot in the chest, it would like punch you in the chest.
It had like four things. It would punch you in the chest or punch you in the back, depending where you got shot.
I might still have one somewhere.
And it worked. I mean, it did work.
But they were like $800.
Yeah, it was crazy. And then the other thing was we were gonna had to do a segment on the World Cyber Games.
No, beyond the
game. Which was at the time fronted by Blaine, Blaine Howard, who's now at Microsoft, who became the editorial director of XPlay a few years later.
Oh, that's crazy.
He's a good friend, and also the largest, closest thing to Superman I know. He's a very large, muscular man. He's like it's like someone drew him. And but he was running the World Cyber Games then. He was friends with Blair, and we hung out and did this thing we had to do. And at one point we're like, okay, now wait, we did that and we did the vest. Like, what else do we need to do? And I was looking around at the other booths, and I realized that every time I looked at a booth, someone at that booth was looking at me. And I was like...
It's like when you're walking through the mall and there's all the kiosks in the middle, and they're begging to make eye contact.
And there was a lot of blank space on the floor.
Oh, there was.
Thing. And there was sort of like
ghost town.
Yeah, the booths were all sort of like they were like lined up in a kind of a big open rectangle.
Yeah.
And so I said, let's just take the camera crew into the middle of the big open space, and we're just going to stand here. Stand here and get some drinks, and and we sort of stood there drinking some Coke, and like slowly people would come out from the side and like, do you want to? I'm like, yes, we do. And so that's how we did it. Like, we would sit in the center with a giant camera crew, and like they'd come out and we'd come over and do like stuff at their booth, and we go back and we'd wait for the next person to come out and ask if we yes, we do. So that was what we did all day. It was like we just waited for people to come ask us to do something, and we did it. We came back with a bunch of stuff, did a segment, and then. Not surprisingly, the one thing I remember is one of the booths that came out and got us was Entropia, which was this MMO where you could pay real money to own property in the game.
To own
and it had right like a month or a couple months before that happened, some dude who I think they said who had like been like left by his wife or something and like had all this money and didn't know what to do with himself, bought like a moon or like an asteroid in the game and turned it into like a big like pleasure island thing for like $100,000 or something, and then like sold it again for like a profit. Like it was like the biggest real estate transaction in like digital history or something. I'm like, it's the biggest real estate transaction for nothing. Is that what you mean?
for ones and
So that was
zeros.
like their big thing they were pushing was like some dude just gave us a ridiculous amount of money for an imaginary space island.
Right.
I remember that. I think I still have the demo disc for that. But
I don't-
and then they shut that down. They shut that. That was like the most exciting thing there.
Yeah.
So that is probably why E4All announced that was the last time they were doing that a few weeks later.
And look, a lot of times something fails, and then everything goes through the cycle again, and you come back around, and then they try it again. I don't see something like E4All being tried again.
No.
I think
Well,
if E3 dies, I think it's just gone.
Maybe, but I don't think E3 dies at once. I think E3 slowly fades away.
I think that's what we're seeing in front of our eyes right now.
I don't
It's
think
the fading.
no.
We're just at the early stages of the fading.
I don't see it in that kind of like spiral yet. I think it could.
I haven't
could
seen
be.
anything getting added. So 2 years ago, they added the general public.
Yeah, the
But
general
since
public
then-
is a big ad. Though.
It is.
Like the general public will keep this thing alive in some form for a long time, just out of inertia and from reputation. One of the reasons people didn't go to E4All is because it wasn't called E3.
Right.
And E3 is going to have that mystique to it for a while until it becomes kind of notorious for something that's not worth the money it costs to go to it. But like, I could see it becoming sort of an E4All sort of show. If that spiral happens and it just continues to spiral, and you get like maybe 4 or 5 years from now, like the booths I described, like that kind of scenario, like that's all that's left.
Yeah.
And like now you're like your booth that used to be like pushed over to the far side of the South Hall. Now
sitting in Sony's
now
spot.
now you can get like right where Sony used to be.
Yeah.
You're in eye line when someone walks into the hall. Like that's the change that happens, and you've still got people that want to go to E3 because E3 is E3, but E3 is not E3 anymore. But people still showed up, and ESA is still making money, so they're like, we gotta find a way to get people to keep coming back. And in the end, I think you're right. Eventually, that just sort of disperses, and that's the end of it. But like in terms of what E3 would become to us, or to like kind of the hardcore demographic who doesn't want to spend $5,000 to go to LA and see a bunch of things they have to wait in line to play for 5 minutes, I could see E3, because I think you're right that announcements would still be a thing, but I could see the whole thing shifting to being, basically a full business conference on site. But the publishers still like kind of follow Nintendo's lead and just do like a direct sort of thing.
Just put out trailers.
Yeah, E3 week becomes sort of like, they all do sort of like an hour-long pre-produced direct sort of thing that sort of goes over their announcement, shows what they're going to show, and that's the end of it.
Yeah.
Like, that's it. And then at Gamescom, people get their hands on it for the first time on a show floor. Like that'd be kind of the double whammy.
Well, we're still 4 months away from E3. But we're kind of at that breaking point where publishers have to figure out if they're going to put down the money for E3. Mm-hmm. So I think once we make it past the end of March, we're pretty much locked in and we shouldn't see any more defections. But next few weeks, I wouldn't be surprised if we start hearing a couple other publishers here and there bailing out.
Yeah.
It's pretty much at the point where they have to decide right now. So
I think the biggest canary in that coal mine is Ubisoft.
Yeah.
If Ubisoft decides they don't want to do it anymore,
that would be really
Ubisoft is like if the friend that comes over like for anything stops coming over.
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
and you're like, oh wait, if
I must have done something really bad.
Like, what?
Yeah.
Something in the house smells terrible, and no one will tell me what it is. But like, it's like it's the ESA.
I can smell your ESA. Yeah. So anyway,
But yeah. So for me, like the death gong would be Ubisoft announces that they're not going to have a booth.
Yep, that would probably be the breaking point.
Not just because they're so ubiquitous and so and also it's like so like but they've got their hands in everything.
Yeah,
like
they're also from Europe.
Yeah,
and so if it's like dominoes, as one starts to change, we've seen it with the American publishers at E3 already. So. There's a lot to talk about for E3 2019 as we kind of start ramping up to the mid-June date, and we'll keep you guys abreast as things break. Let's move on. We're going to talk about Anthem again, people. 3 episodes in a row. It's a gigantic game. It is swirling with controversy still. We're obviously not going to spend a ton of time on it, but we're going to talk about a couple things that happened with the game this week that are pretty freaking crazy. So I think the biggest story, at least for me, is that Anthem was shutting people's consoles down. Think about that. It wasn't just crashing and sending you out to like the login screen. It wasn't sending you back to the dashboard. it was shutting down consoles. That I don't know if I've ever heard of a piece of software doing that to a console.
I've had that happen with the PS4.
Shut down.
Yeah, it just crashes and dies.
Really? I've never had that happen.
And then I had to go up and start it up, and it starts up, and it yells at me about not turning
Shutting
it
it
off
down,
properly.
yeah.
And I'm like, I didn't do it, jerk. And,
Well-
and then it restarts in safe mode and warns you that all your saves could be gone, and then they aren't.
They aren't,
But,
yeah.
And then there's a couple, I guess at least one person said that Anthem bricked their PS4.
Which yesterday, EA, bless their hearts, put out a statement saying that no one's consoles were permanently bricked. Gee, thanks.
Put that one on the box.
Will not permanently brick console.
Now, to be fair, I have not had a single crash on Xbox One X.
Really?
Ever.
I didn't really have crashes. I got booted out to. I think we talked about this last.
Yeah.
Booted out to like the main.
I've gotten hangs. I've had moments where like it's a
Took a while.
connection problem and it hung, but always got back in. I've never been booted out of a mission. I don't think.
I had a problem where it would not count completed missions for me. I had to complete the same mission 5 times before it finally counted. I would finish the mission. It would get to the screen where it tallies everything up, and it would finish that. It would go to the loading screen, and it would just kick me back to the boot screen.
The biggest the only bug I've had multiple times is like when you're in a situation where like you have to kill all the guys in an area, like a non-respawn area.
Yeah.
3 times the last guy I have to kill has been inside a rock, and I couldn't shoot.
Oh man.
But 2 times I was able to use like an explosive or like a lightning strike to like kill him with like AOE. But one time I literally couldn't reach him, and I just had to leave the area and like fail the mission and start again. So yeah, it's not a flawless experience.
No, I think that's well established.
I actually stopped playing it for a while because you may be able to hear in my voice, but I got sick over the weekend. I must have brought something back from air travel the week before, and I stopped playing Anthem just because like it was giving me a headache, and the repetition was starting to like mess with my head. Like just this and the load screen, like the repetition of things when I have a fever can like get in my head and like start to.
I don't think
crazy.
you're alone on that. I think it bothers
And,
a lot of people.
And like Anthem's just sort of constant by rote repetition with no peaks or valleys just was like starting to get to me. And so I stopped playing it, and I ended up playing Fable 3 for some reason. I don't know why. I don't know why that game got
What
in my
an
head,
odd choice.
Also, when I saw Captain Marvel last night, they were running, like all theaters do now, they were running commercials before everybody gets in and the movie starts and the previews run. They're just running, literal just ads. And an ad for Anthem popped up. And I was like, okay, cool. We're in an IMAX theater. It's a big, thing, gameplay footage trailer, and it's sort of like doing like a dramatic read of a mission sort of thing. About halfway through the commercial, the audio cuts out, and then the screen went black for 10 seconds, and then the next commercial started.
Oh, geez.
And it was like, this
The
game cannot catch a break.
It cannot catch a break.
Like it's like you crashed the theater. Like even the theater crashed playing Anthem. So
it's like you couldn't have written a
No.
worse script for this game.
Like-
And so the other thing that happened this week is that they discovered that the first weapon that you get in the game is the strongest weapon in the entire game.
a little bit of a scaling bug.
Yeah, it's a really small bug that has a gigantic impact.
And also, like the most interesting thing about like the demonstrations of that I saw were that the numbers popping up when you hit something
Were
are
bullcrap.
a giant lie.
Yeah.
Like they mean nothing.
Yeah.
Once they get once the scaling thing has been applied to it, like it doesn't matter.
Yeah, so it says a number, but that's not actually the number of hit points that you're taking from the enemy.
Yeah, it seems to like scale as some kind of percentage or something.
Yeah.
And like they said, Bioware said like yes, this is not right, and we have to fix it. Which is it's extra funny because like the level 1 weapon you start with, you can't delete it. You can't break it down.
Right.
Like and if they'd let you break that weapon down, no one would ever have known.
No, you're right. If they'd let you just
like-
scrap it and get the resources from it, no one would have ever known.
Like somewhere, some guy was like insistent, like we can't let them delete that weapon, so they always have a weapon to fall back on, somehow thing, and everyone's giving that dude the side eye in the meeting, like right now, it's just like nice work, Jerry, It's like,
Look, it's a game as a service, so you always think. I mean, Destiny started out rough and it recovered, and
Yeah.
and so you have this like hope that maybe it, but then this stuff just keeps happening, and it just seems like the chances of this game getting on its feet are just like zero.
Well, it's also like really bad when like one of the problems you find is that the loot in your loot shooter doesn't matter.
Right.
Because
that's a problem.
Because your scaling system has sabotaged it. Like,
yeah.
And I'm they'll fix it. But like this is still already out there with a hardcore group, and like you're just hurting word of mouth further. And it's becoming more and more clear that like this game's going to need like a No Man's Sky level reinvention update.
That's
fixing.
A very, very good way to couch it.
And I just have a hard time seeing EA being dedicated enough to let them do that.
Yep.
EA is more of a, okay, just move on to the next thing. I mean, literally with company, like, it would have been impossible to fix that Star Wars game that Amy Hennig was working on. I don't believe that.
I don't believe that either.
But did they want to do it? No. Are they going to want to, I feel like we're going to see this thing get its plug pulled in 18 months or something, and that'll be that.
It seems that way.
Maybe right around the time Dragon Age 4 starts being...
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it has much of a chance to survive.
Which is too bad because it, like you've said, the moment-to-moment gameplay is pretty fun. It works out most of the time. Like I do like flying around. It's adjacent to a game I would really like to play, but it is not that game.
Yeah.
Not yet, if ever.
Yeah. So I have a feeling this will actually be the last time we talk about Anthem for a while.
Till that game in a year. Most disappointing game
conversation.
Yeah. Maybe not for you, but
yeah. I mean, unless they do actually dedicate the resources to turn it around.
Yeah, I mean that's possible.
But like you, I agree that I would be shocked if EA does that. Completely shocked.
It would be very out of character for them. I would accept it. I would be very happy to see that happen, but it just doesn't. It's not their. It's never been their MO.
Yeah.
So
I'd be really shocked. So there you go, Anthem. I was hoping like over the weeks following its release, things would get better, but it appears that they've only gotten worse.
Yeah.
That's pretty bad.
Or like, people just keep digging and they keep finding things.
Yeah.
It's just...
Well, I think people also are they're trying to find stuff.
Yeah, they are, but I mean... Not every game has that stuff to find.
Yeah, that's true.
And like every time you think they've hit the bottom of the barrel, it turns out there was a false bottom on the barrel with another secret hatch that leads to whatever else is wrong with Anthem.
There is a certain faction of people out there that are getting a pretty big level of Schadenfreude out of this game doing poorly. They're like people who say that they don't hate the game have become targets for them to go after.
Yeah, there's something like that happening at Kinda Funny right now.
Yep, Kinda Funny. Apparently, his Patreon has been hit really hard because
Andrea and Greg said that they don't think it's as bad as everybody thinks it is or says it is, and people started pulling their money from their Patreon in response to that.
Yeah, the response on YouTube to me talking about it last week wasn't like that. Like people were like, I agree with you. The gameplay is better than people are making it out to be, but I can't get past all the other crap like you can. People were respectful when they disagreed with me, but apparently in other places that's not been.
Yeah, well, you're also not a girl, so
that's sad. Greg's not a girl either.
No, but Andrea's getting most of the flack on this one.
That's not a surprise.
Yeah, I mean It's not. I don't hate it. Like it's not like the worst thing I've ever played by any stretch of the imagination. It's just, it's
just disappointing.
It's disappointing, and it's an example of how the games as a service thing can sabotage what otherwise should have been a pretty straightforward project. I mean, like if they were allowed to just make a single player action RPG out of this thing, I feel like it would have been pretty great. It could have been another Mass Effect for them.
Yeah.
But that's not what it's not what any of the shareholders want. They want a constant revenue stream at this point, and that ends up with games being compromised and sort of shoved into that mold. And I think that's what we've seen. I think EA just came to them and said, here's this thing you're working on, make it into a Destiny, and that's what we got. This is 7 years they've been working on this game.
Yeah, I know.
Like, I think they've the word is I think Schreier or somebody said like they've restarted it twice during development.
Yeah. If you look at the early stuff that BioWare put out for this game before it was named or anything, it looks like a completely different game.
Yeah. What else? You had all this stuff with like, a continuous, seamless world, Clearly
Right.
not.
Yeah.
Being able to pick up new missions and dynamic mission stuff from the Striders out in the field. Clearly not there. Maybe one day it will be there. I mean, they've talked about adding that, I think. But, and like there's a lot of weird balancing things that it's just like, I think the patch on Tuesday is going to make the Titans much less bullet spongy, which is like, who didn't know that was going to be an issue? I mean, like the first time you fight one of those things, you're like, this takes forever. Like even with 3 people.
Yep.
And like the weird thing where like, like the story is clearly about one freelancer. Like there is no reference to or a kind of explanation of the 3 other people you're playing these missions with once you get out into the gameplay world.
I think they're in a position with that though, because those 3 people are always going to be different people.
Right. But like there's no mention of like you and the other freelancers or like you and that's an
No, even the voiceover that you hear, it acts as if you're the only person there. Yeah.
And which is like,
it's weird.
It's weird, but it's also like, well, if that was originally supposed to be more of a solo thing, you can't go back and re-record all that stuff because it's too expensive. Yeah. So you just like make do with what it is, and you hope that nobody notices.
And unfortunately, there's people like us who notice everything.
Well, also when you play something for like 40 hours, you're going to notice stuff like that. So that's not like a thing that kills the game, but it's going to contribute. There's all these little tiny. It's a death of 1,000 cuts. It's just little things that make it feel like not like itself or not gelling like a cohesive whole, or just like like you're not being told the whole story to some degree. And I think it's also the victim of like happens to be the game of its kind that came out at the time when kind of the core gaming demographic is just tired of that happening. Like they're tired of the games as a service thing. They're tired of games being twisted in development by publishers who want to like monetize them in not even necessarily consumer unfriendly ways, but in ways that don't make sense in context of the game that the developer's trying to make. And they're tired of these games that are like Destiny launching with all these problems that are so similar to what Destiny went through, when like you'd think that having seen this happen, you would know not to do that. But then again, you kind of end up in that situation where it just, we said it and a whole bunch of other people have said it, this game needed 6 months to a year longer to bake. Yeah. It's not done.
We talk about this when we do our Game of the Year awards at the end of the year every year about disappointment. Mm-hmm. And disappointment is a function of how excited and anticipated you and how much you anticipated something beforehand. And so people are supremely disappointed in this game because their expectations were really high, and rightfully so.
Yeah.
There are other games that are worse or maybe appeared better and then were way worse than this one was in reality, but it's not as big a deal because people didn't care about those games as much as they cared about this one.
And even a game being disappointed doesn't even necessarily mean it's bad.
Right.
It just means that it didn't meet
what
you were hoping for.
Yep.
And they had no compunction about making us hope on this one.
Yep. Hey, Jay Pellet, thank you for subscribing via Twitch Prime. And Don Lionheart says it's been 14 months in a row that you've subscribed. Thank you very much. All right, let's move on. We're going to talk next about Nintendo. So we talk about EA, and we never have very many good things to say about EA, rightfully so. And sometimes I feel like we maybe get that way a little bit with Nintendo. I think Nintendo fans would say that we're not a Nintendo-friendly podcast because we're not, we like Nintendo's
We're
games.
not anyone-friendly.
But we call it like we see it. We call it right down the line. The platform doesn't really matter, and I think for a lot of fans of consoles, that can rub people the wrong way. But I feel like this is a case where we can talk about Nintendo and give it its due. So this week, one of the developers that Nintendo works with on its mobile projects did an interview, and it basically said that, you know what, we could make a lot more money if Nintendo would just let us do with its games what we do with every other mobile game we develop. So basically it's saying Nintendo tells us, hey, we don't want those predatory practices in our mobile games, and because it's Nintendo and they're floating the bill for the project, they have to remove that stuff. And they're saying that not only is Nintendo making less money, but Cygames, that's the developer, said that it is also making far less money off Nintendo's mobile projects than it had hoped to. Matt, what do you think is the right answer here? Because when you start talking about mobile games, there's a certain expectation of how they monetize things. And for better or worse, I think most people would agree that that assumption is that it's shady and probably a little predatory. But people have grown so used to it. You see it all the time in all kinds of different walks of life. people get so used to something so bad that they no longer view it as bad. And I feel like that's kind of what has happened with mobile games. Now, no matter what, we're going to praise Nintendo for being consumer friendly. I mean, period. That's just the way it is. But if you're a stockholder of Nintendo, which I'm not, but if you are, how do you feel about this? Because that's a tug of war. The consumer versus the stockholder is something a company always has to wrangle with.
Yeah, I don't know. Apparently, if I'm a stockholder of anything today, I am angry if things are not improving infinitely forever upward, even though that is not possible. I feel like I would be more happy that the Switch is doing so well and that the mobile thing to me would just be sort of a side gig. If Nintendo,
just a bonus.
Yeah, if Nintendo was in more dire straits, maybe it would be more upsetting that they wouldn't go for the throat to make whatever money they could, but they aren't. Like, they're kind of riding as high as they've ridden in the last 12 years at this point. And I don't think it's that big of a deal. It wouldn't be to me as a stockholder, but I am not a crazy person.
Yeah.
As far as I know.
Let me be the judge of that.
I mean, I appreciate their stand on that. They're like, that's not how we want to do things, not what we want to make. So, and if they did go the other way, they wouldn't really be the Nintendo we know anymore.
Yeah.
Because Nintendo does have it in their DNA that, like, they at least give lip service to the idea that they want people to have fun first and foremost. You pay for it because their pricing structure is a little more rigid, but it might be because they aren't willing to go cutthroat to get
make
that extra dollar on the dollar.
Because if you look at a game like Fire Emblem Heroes, it's doing really well for Nintendo without being slimy.
Yeah, and I play it moderately, and I do feel like they're pretty generous. Like, they pop up things on my phone where it's like, come now and get a 5-star thing, and you get a free 5-star hero. They want you to spend more, but like, I haven't spent really any money on that game. I don't think, not outside of, I think maybe $5 during one event.
And that game was free when it launched, right?
Yeah, and it's still free, and I get tons of heroes and various 4 and 5 stars, and like, I don't even really try or play it that hard. It's very generous. So like, they're probably leaving a lot of that money on the table from the really addicted whale kind of demographic. But if Nintendo doesn't want to be part of that, like, more power to them. Like, great. Like, if more game companies did that, we would have better mobile games, frankly. So, yeah, I mean, I think the shareholder point is a valid observation, but my gut reaction is I could not possibly care less what those people think.
Me either. So, I don't own any Nintendo stock, so I could care less what they care about. But as a corporation, that's something that's always in the back of your mind. Do you think that Nintendo may ever change its stance on how it's doing things now?
Maybe, but I don't. Who knows what Bowser is going to do?
Yeah, I mean, seriously, you don't know.
Yeah, who knows?
So now there's new leadership.
New leadership in Japan. New leadership in America.
Exactly.
Was Reggie the last bastion standing between us and predatory mobile game practices? Who knows?
It's possible.
It's possible. Probably
but
not.
Doubtful. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like Nintendo's board would have to be pretty much on the same page for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think you can make the case to your shareholders as Nintendo that this is just not who we are. Our company is a little friendlier, a little less cutthroat when it comes to that. Because when you think about it, it's like they are pretty cutthroat when it comes to competing with their industry competitors.
They are, yeah.
But they're not cutthroat when it comes to exploiting their customers.
Yep.
Unless they're charging them a lot of money for cardboard. But even then, they try to mitigate that with the ability to print your own.
Yeah.
So I feel like if you're invested in Nintendo and you're upset about that, I don't think you really understand the company you invested in.
Yeah, that's a good point. You haven't done your due diligence, essentially, which is the
There's
first thing
1,000
you should do
other companies you could invest in that will do that if that's really what you want them to do.
What about Animal Crossing Pocket Camp? It has not done very well.
No, I mean, I know several people that play that every day.
Yeah.
But they don't spend money on it.
Right.
Because they don't have to.
Yeah, they're not generating revenue from it.
It doesn't force them to spend money on it.
So is there like a point where you're like, okay, maybe Nintendo does need to look at how it's developing mobile games a little more closely?
Maybe. I mean,
Because I didn't stick with Pocket Camp. I bounced off, and I'm a big Animal Crossing player, and after like a couple days, I was out of there.
I think maybe a more Nintendo solution for that would be to charge up front for the games.
Which, Pachter hates.
Yeah,
he thinks that's like the road to ruin with mobile games.
But like, $5 and you don't have to worry about, microtransactions unless you want to, which is already kind of how they are, but at least you get like $5 out of everybody up front.
Yeah.
And then like kind of do like expansion stuff for another $5, 8-9 months later, you get all this new stuff. And it's not like a random thing. It's not like a gachapon, like, random, loot box thing. It's more of here's new content if you want to pay for it. And if you don't, you can still play. It's still fine.
Gotcha.
I just feel, it's an alternate method, and it might not make money hand over fist the way like the microtransaction, like loot box. I mean, it's not loot box. I mean, you know what I mean, like the gachapon, capsule machine sort of thing.
I mean, loot boxes. You don't know what you're getting until they're open.
Yeah, I don't think of them as loot boxes on mobile games because they're usually not boxes.
Right. They always have some other little avatar that they use for it.
I feel like that could be kind of an alternate method of distribution that Nintendo could explore because A, they clearly don't want to do the standard sort of slot machine idea, and B, they have the resources to fall back on if it fails to do something else. They're not going to go out of business if this way of pricing, like say, didn't work.
They have the luxury of being nice, basically.
But I think if anyone's in a position to sort of explore new, more customer-friendly ways of getting mobile games out there on a profit, but also in a fair way to the consumer, Nintendo's it. Yeah. Like because they have the money. It's sort of their third pillar. Yep. And they can sort of, I guess, second now that the 3DS is going away.
Yeah. Which is crazy to think about.
But I think Nintendo, just as a company, is going to have to experiment with that and find a place where they're making enough money to keep kind of the people they're working with and their shareholders happy, but also keep the people who run Nintendo happy with the idea that they are still themselves.
Yep.
There does seem to be a pang of conscience at the top of that company that doesn't really go away no matter who's running it.
No, you're right. And, I mean, this is one area I think where we should just commend Nintendo. I think it's done a great job with its transition to mobile.
It's held that line for years now.
It has. It was resistant to mobile games. And then when it finally came into the market, while, again, if you're a stockholder, you're probably not happy with how Nintendo's handling that business. If you're merely a consumer or someone that just likes Nintendo's games, it is absolutely knocking it out of the park. Mm-hmm. So keep doing what you're doing, Nintendo. Don't listen to those rich folks who are trying to influence you. Because that's really what it is. The rich folks just want them to squeeze every penny out of Nintendo fans.
Yep.
And Nintendo, at least so far in mobile, has been very consumer.
Isn't it enough they priced the Yoshi game at $60?
Yeah, exactly.
Come on.
All right, let's move on. We're going to talk next about something that's not so fun and sunny. And that is Steam, the latest Steam controversy. And it seems like there's one about every 4 to 6 months.
Yeah.
Roughly.
If we're not going to put Half-Life 3 out, we got to talk about something.
We do. And the latest controversy on Steam is that there was a game on Steam called Rape Day that was on Steam for months, by the way, while it was in development.
And nobody seemed to really notice it until recently.
Nope. And then as it was coming out of development and into early access, it surfaced and people started discovering it and people started freaking out. And so this game, it's called Rape Day, it's a post-apocalyptic game. So the apocalypse happens and suddenly rape is okay. And that's really all the game is about. You go around in the apocalypse and rape innocent women.
Yeah, it's like 30 minutes long or something, like I said.
Yep, and basically it is the guy who created it basically just tried to fill it with as much vile stuff as he could across its 30-minute runtime. So we've got some screenshots here from the game. We're not going to show it in motion. It's not a particularly good-looking game, but I will say that it looks better than I thought it was going to look before I ever saw the first screenshots of it. But you can see just from these screenshots, like that one right there, you have the choice. Basically, you play as a girl, and you have a choice of, do I get under the desk? Do I huddle with my coworkers? Here you can see an actual rape scene from the game. Apparently, the original version of the game actually had a child murder in it. And you'll see a screenshot from that scene coming up here in a second. Literally, an infant was murdered in the game initially. It's a god-awful game. I mean, I think you can see just from these screenshots what we're talking. It's terrible. There's really no redeeming value to the game whatsoever. However, is it a free speech issue?
No. Not in any way.
Why?
Because Valve is a private company. If they don't want to sell something on the service, that is not a free speech or a censorship issue. They are not the government. The guy can sell his game however he wants, whenever he wants, but Steam doesn't want to carry it, and that's that.
You're absolutely right. Steam has taken it off of.
I don't know why Steam doesn't have something in their frickin' algorithm that alerts them when someone puts a game with rape in the title on their service.
Yeah,
but
you would think that, even on Twitch, you can set up keywords and stuff.
I understand that Valve prides themselves on being reactive to stuff like this and not actually patrolling their own service. But how is that not a thing? Could someone just put a game up called Fuck Fuck Fuckity Fuck and you wouldn't notice until it got out of green light? What is going on?
I think probably, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like it.
I mean, they put out a statement about it, and basically they said what you just said, that unfortunately, with our business, you have to be reactive instead of proactive.
Well, I'm going to make a new game called Valve Sucks and We'll Never Notice This Game Is Here. And
Jim Sterling will play it and review it.
Yes. It'll be an asset flip racing game set on Mars.
I feel bad even laughing during this topic because this game is so vile.
It is, but it's also so's the guy who made it. If you read his whole point was he wants to normalize rape, the way murder has been normalized in video games. His argument
for why this game should be on Steam, should exist, why he made it, was that murder has been normalized by video games, movies, and television, and rape hasn't.
And apparently he doesn't understand that there's a reason for that.
Or that there's a difference, apparently.
Right. It's I mean, probably what happened here is his best case scenario. Suddenly everybody knows the game exists, and we're talking about it.
We'll want to seek it out. We'll seek it out. Go to his private website where he doesn't lose that cut from Steam either.
I mean, I've heard of it. That's the only way I would have heard of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that this happened?
Yeah, I mean, I don't dig around in the bottom of the barrel.
No, I mean, I know that these things exist. Hell, we did some overviews of games that have very Japanese hentai games that have very similar premises back on XPlay.
They're not quite as
graphic,
overtly,
but we one of did we do that? Maybe we didn't do that. There was one.
We had pitched.
It was one called Biko, which you basically stalk people through a subway station and kidnap them and rape and kill them.
Yeah.
That was the whole game.
Right.
And I think what happened there is the intern played it and was like, I don't think you can show this on TV.
Yeah.
And we're like, yeah, that's probably true.
Yeah.
Because we started those segments with sexy beach.
Right.
And and people just started
spiraled.
We started ordering whatever we could find because there wasn't a huge market. And some of these things we got in were horrifying.
What's the big one? Rape-lay?
Rape-lay was it was a fighting game where you knock everybody's clothes off or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, this game though to me is the farthest extreme. Those Japanese games.
Matter of fact, when I saw this story pop up, I first thought it was a typo for Rape-lay.
Right.
I was like, wait, did they make another one of those? And
I'm sure that was also part of his ideas. Let's get the title as closely as possible to this other thing that people may be Googling or whatever, and it gets dirty. So I agree with you 1,000%. It's Valve is a company. It has the right to put on its service whatever it wants. And basically the excuse that Valve gave for cutting it was it's bad for our business.
That's a loaded statement. Both in terms of the things Valve does that's not good for its business, and in terms of can't you just say it's vile shit and you don't want it on your damn service? Why the weasel wording of how they phrase it is gross to me.
You're right, it is gross. And the reason they're doing it that way is because they know that there's a contingent of people that like content like this.
Right.
And they don't want to scare them off from buying the other stuff on Steam that they're not going to remove. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the sad truth of it all, if you really want to break it down. I mean, that's also why this game lived on Steam for several months before, and Valve did nothing until people started freaking out about it, and there were petitions being signed online. Even then, Valve took days to take this down from Steam.
Can you imagine, Sony doing that?
No. Or
Nintendo. Not that that's possible in the same way that stuff gets, but or even GOG Like
Yeah.
it just doesn't. Like nothing is so readily abused as Steam in terms of, in
You're
this
right.
way.
And it's because it's the Wild West. Just recently, here's the other rub with this whole topic, is that just recently, Valve basically came out and said, we're hands off now. Mm-hmm. We tried.
Now?
Right. Well, they
What?
contend that they tried to be a gatekeeper and that it wasn't working and it just caused more problems than it solved.
Yeah.
And they were like, look, we're just going to let the Wild
Have you ever
West...
considered that maybe you're just bad at it?
Yeah. Or you're just not throwing enough resources.
Right. I mean, that's really what
it is.
Yeah.
Because...
Everyone else can do it.
Right. You can hire enough people so that you have a human being look at every video game that's submitted to your service.
Mm-hmm.
It's not even like YouTube where any Yahoo can record something on his cell phone and immediately upload it, yet
Right.
somehow YouTube can police all that stuff. We're talking about a game that somebody develops and puts onto your service. There's not like
And
1,000...
calls it that.
Yeah,
Like
there's
it's not hiding.
Yeah, it's not like there's 1,000 games uploaded to Steam every day. And even if there were, you can still afford to police
Right.
that. Valve is just like, look, we don't want to spend a ton of money on it, so Like, it astonishes me that so many people are so blindly loyal to Valve when there's so many instances and evidence that should suggest to them that they should not be. I get it. Valve made some great games like 20 years ago.
Yep.
Like literally like 20 years ago it's been. And so I understand that a lot of people really like Half-Life and they really like Portal. So what? Like at a certain point you have to hold everyone accountable for the things that they're doing. And while
Valve is bigger than those games.
Yes.
You know, when I think say Valve is terrible at what they're doing here, I'm not trying to condemn the people who made Portal.
Right.
Like they didn't do this.
Yeah.
You know, they're
It's corporate.
game developers.
Yeah, it's Valve corporate. That seems to be the problem. So, you know, when we were talking about a lot about how
It's in the same way that you can maybe be angry with EA for what happened with Anthem, but not hate BioWare.
Right.
You know,
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
they're not the same people. Not the same entities are not calling these shots.
Yep. Yeah. So,
Valve is just more monolithic because their internal workings are a little more impenetrable.
yeah. Well, it's like when we were going through this, we were talking about Epic Game Store and Valve and how, you know, Valve has been gouging customers, taking more money than it should have all these. It was crazy to see how many Valve fanboys came out of the woodwork.
Gouging developers, too.
Yeah. And to defend Valve and say, oh, 30%, blah, blah, they can take whatever they want. They did it first. And defending Valve instead of the developers.
That's not how
who are
anything
I
works,
know,
though. Like,
I know. But it shocked me how many people came out of
Undercutting the
woodwork.
competition is basic capitalism.
That's how it works.
Like-
Yeah. That's you provide the same service for
Yeah.
less.
Valve's just being able to ride solo for so long that people like forgot that that's a thing you can do.
Yeah.
almost.
That we live in a capitalist society. So I'm sure there are probably going to be Valve fanboys that are going to stand up for Valve. In this instance, again, it did ultimately take it down, but having it on your service for a couple months and then being alerted to it and waffling about it for
Right.
3
It's
or
like
4
congratulations,
days.
you did the right thing. Eventually, kicking and screaming.
Right.
Like-
yeah. That's not what I expect from Valve. Valve to me,
I mean, it kind of is what I expect.
at this
from
point
Valve,
it is.
But yeah,
You're right.
But it's not what they should be.
right. They're an industry leader. That's not something that leaders do.
No.
Valve should be setting the example for everybody else.
Yeah. Leaders don't generally just go, "Oh yeah, I guess you're right. We'll look at it." Like that's
Nope.
not
Leaders
how
are
you-
decisive and they make decisions very quickly and they make the right ones. And Valve did not do that again. So I don't know what the answer is because apparently Valve's not willing to throw the money at moderation that it needs to.
Yeah.
They're just going to say, we'll just slough it off onto our community to do it.
Yeah,
even though we have plenty of money.
I don't. It's what I don't get is instead they're doing what with it? Just banking it? Like what? I don't know what they're like. What are they doing? They already laid off a bunch of hardware people, including the VR hardware guys.
VR hardware people. After the rumors of them working on an HMD.
Yeah.
What do they do with the money? That's what I'm saying. Like, people keep giving Valve a pass. They're not your friends.
Team Fortress 2 can't possibly cost that much to keep going.
I mean, look, I once you get to a certain age, I think it's hard for you to comprehend how people can rally around a company anyway when they're just taking their money. When you're younger, you don't quite understand how things work. You're just like, I like what they make, so I love them. Once you get to a certain age, you kind of get over that stuff. But with Valve,
certain things.
I guess, I don't know. I don't really have loyalty to anything like that at this point in my life.
The Pittsburgh Penguins, the Pittsburgh Steelers. They're still corporate.
They are.
Massive
That's a good point.
entities.
Sports teams. That's true.
It's just there's no social stigma about not outgrowing that.
That's true. That's a good point.
Also because they engage with it. But that's the same thing where it's like you can root for those players and those coaches and those teams and still acknowledge that the people who own those teams and run those teams are scum in some cases.
Well,
I don't know specifically about your teams, but like that's the same. It's like, I can love the Portal guys and I can love the people who make the games whenever Valve gets around to putting one out, and still think the people that run Valve and run the side of Valve that manages Steam are doing the wrong thing.
Well, to take your analogy, the sports analogy, so Sam walks in today. When Sam walks in, he and I always talk about sports for a little bit.
And I go in the other room.
You do, yeah. And today we were talking about, there's a Pittsburgh Steelers player right now, a really good one of the best players in the NFL. His name's Antonio Brown. And there's all this crazy stuff going on about him right now. He's basically trying to force his way off the team, even though he's still under contract. And we were talking about it, and I was like, bon voyage, dipshit. Like, I don't care. I'm like, to me, you're a cancer on the team. They never won anything while he was on the team. And so I was like, I don't care. Sayonara, c'est la vie. And Sam was like, what? Like, it's Antonio Brown. And so, here's an instance where just because he's a Steeler and he played for this team that I root for, I don't like him. And
there's people that would hit you in a bar for saying that.
Sure, there are some. Yeah. But I think the vast majority of Steelers fans...
Not all of them are younger than you.
No, you're right. But I would say the vast majority of Steelers fans do believe what I believe, which is, see you later, we don't want you on the team, we don't care.
Well, there's also an element of, like, Pennsylvania sports fans seem to be a little...
They're more dedicated.
They're dedicated, but they're also, like whatever... Like, they will turn on... there's no, like, blind loyalty to, like, various player or whatever.
No, there's not.
Like, we need to win, and if you are not getting us to win, you need to go.
That's pretty much it.
Whereas, I come from up San Francisco way, and it didn't matter how terrible the Giants were. Like, people just like, oh, the Giants are gonna pull up. I was like, not those people aren't. But like the idea of like saying that like the problem was like that you don't have a good enough team was blasphemy.
Right.
So like I know what you're talking about. It's just. And in the game world, it does sort of manifest as like rooting for these individual corporate entities, but like that's just how it that's where tribalism goes.
Yeah.
And no matter what form it takes.
And look, when I was
younger, you also see it with like the people that like will defend Elon Musk for anything.
Yeah, you're right.
It's just sort of how it is now.
And when I was younger, I was a fanboy of the Steelers. Like anything they did was just golden. Like, it didn't matter. Like, I didn't know. I had no clue how it worked, or I rooted for the Steelers, and if the Steelers won, I was happy, and if they lost, I was sad. But now that I've gotten older, I understand the business. That's changed, and I feel like for most people, that should happen with video games as well. It definitely happened for me with games, but it doesn't seem like that's happening with Valve. For whatever reason, people are willing to stand beside or behind Valve, no matter what it seems to do. It's really bizarre.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably pretty hard to see past that like 1,000 game library you have.
Yep, you're probably right.
There,
Yeah.
Like that's such an investment.
Yep.
And
you start thinking about all the Steam sales where you've got like 20 games for like $4.
Yeah. And you don't even, it's like, okay, what if something really bad happens to Valve and Steam goes away? What happens to all those games?
Right. Yeah.
Now, what happens is they just let you download them or have, that would probably still exist in some way.
You hope.
But like,
but that's also ridiculous because Steam's not going away.
Gabe has actually said that though. Gabe has said if anything was to happen, they have a plan in place that would.
Oh, really?
I mean, the problem you'd run into there is like, do I have a hard drive big enough to do that with?
Right.
You might have to add 13 terabytes or so, but like.
And maybe that is part of the problem. It's Gabe. People have resonated with Gabe since the beginning.
Yeah, there is an element of this where I'm like, what does Gabe think about this?
I think every time something happens at Valve,
I feel like Gabe wouldn't be happy with Rape Day.
Exactly. I think about that every time something happened with Steam or Valve. I'm like, because I feel like I know him. Like, I kind of do know him. And so that's the first thing that pops in my mind. Like, what would he think about this? Does he care anymore? Is he even engaged with the company anymore? Like, it makes me think that he's not. That he is just kind of a figurehead now. He comes to work like once a week and then
How old is Gabe?
Pretty old. I mean, he's 60s.
Yeah, I mean, that's like right now it's hard. It's kind of weird, like realizing that all, God, watching the Oscars and seeing Dana Carvey come out. I was just like, oh my God,
Old.
We are old.
Yeah.
Like, that's what how old Dana Carvey is now.
And you got to wonder, when does Gabe just say, I don't care anymore. I got more money I'm like in my 60s. Like, when does he step away, and then what happens? So,
yeah, he's just hanging out with George R. R. Martin right now. There's no one cares.
And it's not even that I really care that people become fanboys and become so obsessed with a company that they'll overlook it. The problem is when you're overlooking all the things that they do wrong, they're never going to fix them. As long as you have people there as cheerleaders saying, that's great, that's okay, then they're like, whoop, doesn't look like there's a problem to me. We'll just keep rolling the way things are, and then things never change and get better. So, we talk about fanboys on this show a lot, and I think this is one case where typically they're harmless. They go online and they start arguments with people, but they don't really affect me. But if you really start thinking about it, as if they're an echo chamber for what the publisher's doing, the publisher is never going to change. And that's not just true of Valve, that's true of all of them. So I feel like we're doing a disservice to the industry and to some of these publishers, in all honesty, by letting them slide on stuff like this. And in my opinion, I think Valve gets away with more than any other publisher.
Yep.
Yeah.
I can't find a way to disagree with that.
Yeah. So hopefully Rape Day's gone. He can sell it to the 1,000 people that are going to go to his website and buy it, and it'll be gone for good. Hopefully Valve learned a lesson, but if you let them off the hook, they're not gonna. So you need to hold people accountable. Otherwise, they're never going to do things the right way. They're never going to change. So.
And I've accidentally turned the chat into football chat. So.
Uh-oh. People are talking about football?
Yep.
Nice job, Kyle.
Everyone's like, oh, it's a good point. And then, like, you started talking about the Antonio Brown thing, and, like, it just started.
It went off. That Antonio Brown thing, like, I realize most people watching this probably have no idea who Antonio Brown is. But if you're into football or into sports, what's going on with that right now is, like, unprecedented. Because he is essentially saying, I won't go anywhere you trade me, even though I'm under contract. And he can't. I mean, he's a human being. You can't force him to go to some other city.
I mean, you can sue him for breach of contract.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it's looking like it's going to come down to, in all honesty. Anyway, I don't want to get on sports too long, even though you guys are all blowing up the chat with it right now. All right, let's move on. We're going to talk next about Sony's first-party games for PlayStation 4. So we came into this year, we did our fantasy draft. Neither of us drafted any games. We drafted an alternate because why not? It's like a wild card. Maybe it works out, maybe it doesn't. But we didn't draft any Sony first-party games, even though they'll probably, if they do come out, they'll be some of the best scoring games of the year, presumably. But we don't know any release dates. We know there's 3 big games that are still in the hopper. There's Death Stranding, there's Ghost of Tsushima, and there's The Last of Us Part 2.
Yeah.
And we don't know release dates for any of those. But this week, news broke on all of them in that regard. So first of all, Death Stranding. Kojima went on a radio show in Japan, and they started asking him questions about it, and he let slip that the game's behind schedule.
What a shocker.
I don't even know if he let it slip. I think he was just like, you know what? I need to get this out there.
Yeah, I think that was the point of that interview, was to, like, warn people.
Yeah.
Which is extra funny, because, like, there was a schedule. We don't know what the schedule is. Like, how would I know that game's late?
No, I think the blurb on Sifted was like, it's hard to delay something when you don't have a release date for it, but now it appears that it's coming later than expected.
I would guess it was, like, in response to the fact that, like, so many people have this sort of theory that all these Sony games are coming this year.
Yeah.
And there had been a lot of rumors that, like, Death Stranding might even be June.
Right.
And it felt like this interview was sort of his chance to sort of, like, be like, don't expect this in June, folks. Like,
I think it was him saying, don't expect it this year.
I think that's also correct.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what was going on right there. And not a surprise. I mean, it's Kojima. He's delayed every game he's ever made.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, if it's only like
except for maybe Boktai.
Even if he gets it out next year, it's still going to be a pretty crazy turnaround for a Kojima game.
Yeah, I mean, that'll still be a very short development schedule for
like that's
one
a
of his
very
games.
reasonable development cycle.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you expect, 3 years.
Yeah.
If you want a good game anyway. If you talk to Pac, you need 8.
What?
Well, yeah, I mean, he would. So people are.
Is he a Star Citizen backer?
No,
Because that's what they say too.
He was making a point about people railing on Anthem and why Anthem is like kind of busted and broken, and saying that and people were comparing it to Red Dead Redemption 2, and Pac's like, that's not fair. Red Dead Redemption 2 was in development for 8 years, and they probably had a game that worked.
So was
after
Anthem.
8 years?
They started Anthem in 2012.
Yeah.
7 years, but still.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
You know what else they made in 7 years? Assassin's Creed 1.
Yeah.
You know what they made in 3 years? Assassin's Creed Origins.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I guess maybe time doesn't matter. A lot of it is just up to the skill of the developer.
Yeah, like a lot. I mean, Assassin's Creed 1 took 7 years because they had to invent a bunch of tech for it. But
I didn't realize Anthem had been in development for 7 years.
That's when it started. Like that one. Was it Schreier? I can't remember if it was Schreier or like a Polygon thing, but it was like they basically the word was that they basically started over twice.
Wow.
Nobody knows what it was or why or whatever like that. But I mean, I think it was always like Iron Man suits in a alien fantasy world thing.
Right.
But like,
concept
the project's
was the
been
same.
around since 2012.
Wow. I didn't know that.
So, yeah, Anthem had quite a development cycle.
That's a
I mean,
big
what we're
problem.
playing now probably did get made in about 3 years.
So wait, when did Mass Effect 3 come out? What year was that?
Mass
2012?
Effect 3 was 2012. Yes.
Yeah.
That
So,
was.
yeah,
I think that was like 2012, like 3 days ago or something.
Yeah,
like
so I
that.
guess you're right. Here we are 7 years later.
Yeah.
Because this is the next game from that team.
Is it?
Has anything come out since Mass Effect 3 from that
Well,
squad?
no, I guess they did. That was Edmonton. This was Edmonton mostly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because Dragon Age 4 is backburnered for
And Andromeda was another.
Andromeda was
studio,
Montreal. Yeah. And then Vancouver is just.
So
sort
you're
of
right.
support.
They had 7 years to make this game. Bum bum ba-dum. Wow.
But again, if they started over that much, what we're playing right now is probably a 2 to 3 year development
You're right.
cycle.
Yeah, probably now is like a 3-year game.
Yeah. And it happened. It happens. But like, if you know what you're doing and all the tech's in place, it doesn't take that long.
Yeah.
But I think we'll never know the full behind-the-scenes story on that.
But anyway, back to the point of Kojima.
Death Stranding, I feel, even though we don't know what the hell it is, I feel like Kojima generally does have a pretty solid, no pun intended, like plan in his head for what he wants a game to be.
Yeah, I don't think he has a good idea of how long it's going to take to get it there.
Not always, no. I feel like Konami would not disagree with you on that.
Yeah.
Certainly Metal Gear Solid 5 is not what Kojima imagined. And
it was in development for a really long time.
But like Death Stranding seems like, I'm curious how long it's going to be. I'm curious. I
I
wonder
wouldn't be
if
shocked if it ends up being episodic. I really wouldn't. And I know people would freak out about it. But it may get to a point where Sony's just like, look, man, like...
I don't think that'll happen, but I would not be totally shocked to see like a Ground Zeroes sort of thing happen. Where like you get a little taste
of it
that
to
then
hold you over and while
carries
they
in
finish it
somehow.
up. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised either.
Just to get something out there, just
Right.
to just to put a foot down somewhere.
Yep. Then to address the other two games, so Ghost of Tsushima. There was it a retail leak, a German retailer?
It was a German retailer leak that listed a release date of August 31st.
30th. It was 30th. It wasn't the 31st, which is important.
Yeah, the very last day of a month tends to be placeholder.
Right,
The
and this
30th.
wasn't. It was the 30th and not the 31st. So people are freaking out thinking Ghost of Tsushima is going to come out here in the next
The 30th
few months.
is a Friday,
which
tends to be a release day
for
now.
big games. Yeah.
Now, I would be thrilled if that was true.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be thrilled if Death Stranding came out this year. Absolutely.
I would take this over Death Stranding 14 times over.
I don't know. That's a good question, actually.
I would take this in a heartbeat over Death Stranding because I know Death Stranding is just going to annoy me. Even if I like it, there's going to be stuff in it that annoys me, and this is Sucker Punch, and Sucker Punch just makes me happy.
What I'm weighing right there, though, is the mystery of Death Stranding versus what I know is going to be an extremely high quality for Ghost of Tsushima.
Right. I just don't
But
care
a known
about
quantity.
the mystery.
Yeah.
I don't care what Death Stranding is. I really don't. Like, it's just so blah to me. Like, I'm going to be interested to see what it is just because, like, it annoys me when someone doesn't tell me something.
Right.
But, like, it's not like I can't wait to play that because all I know I'm going to do is walk through an area with a box on my back.
Right.
That's all I know. Whereas Ghost of Tsushima looks great.
It does.
And I did talk to some of the Sucker Punch guys in a bar last E3, and I did ask Brian, one of the co-founders, like, is that on a PS5? Is this like next gen teasing? He was like, no, that is a PS4 Pro. It's all this gen. I swear to God. He basically implied I would play it sooner than I thought. So that would.
To me, it's not that far.
That would line up pretty well with a this year release date. So that of all the games that we don't know yet, this is the one that I've been kind of secretly hoping is the one that makes it this year. One of if any of them make it this year, because A, I want to play it the most because it's Sucker Punch, and B, they just seem so confident about it when we talked about it at E3 when I ran into them at E3. And like they were all so happy about the response, and so like cause sometimes you talk to developers and they're like, yeah, I mean, we're doing a thing, they're like, it's great, like it's gonna be great, like we're so they're so happy about it. They were so like happy, clearly, like you know when you see like when we talked to the Insomniac guys about Spider-Man when they announced that at Packers Party that year, you could tell these people were thrilled to be working on what they're working on, and that is not a given in game development.
No,
believe
not
you
at
me.
all.
But no, all the Sucker Punch guys were like super enthusiastic and positive about both the response and what they're working on. So like that is always like a really good sign to me that a game is going to be something special.
Definitely. And then the final game of the trio, The Last of Us Part 2. Also this week, there was a poster that leaked out from some Mexican retailer that showed it is coming out in October.
That would seem to be the right time for that.
Halloween-ish.
Yeah.
I mean, it didn't have a specific date. It just said October 2019.
It would be a little out of character for Sony because Sony usually doesn't put their big first-party stuff in that period. They lean on Call of Duty and like the big third-party stuff.
Yeah.
But like I kind of believe that news. Like
Yeah,
I kind of feel like that fits.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, that's a perfect month to release it.
And it gives you a year to make the PS5 special edition.
Yeah, which is exactly what they did with the first game.
The first one, yeah.
It's identical.
Yeah, which I might add is exactly what I said that we're going to do with this.
Yeah, from the beginning, I believe.
beginning.
Literally from like the beginning,
Yes.
I think you said that.
I didn't realize how many other games would also get that treatment because I feel like all of these games are going to have that happen.
It's probably.
I feel like you're going to be able. I mean,
you're going to play. I just think
either
every
that or
game
backwards
is gonna,
compatibility, whatever.
Yeah,
like all these
everything.
games are going to look amazing on PS5, and that's going to be one of the things they try to sell it on. But they're going to get that money from you first.
Yep. So let's rate them. Which one is more likely to come out this year, in your opinion? Ghost of Tsushima or The Last of Us Part 2?
I think Ghost of Tsushima.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just feel like. Last of Us has been teased a lot.
I will
and
say, though,
I know like
games...
Ghost of Tsushima, we've only really seen that one thing, but I also feel like Sucker Punch doesn't really do the thing where they tease you for years.
Yeah. I mean, they honestly, for both
and it's about
games,
time.
Yeah. For both games, we've got about the same amount of media.
That's true. Yeah.
We got a first trailer, and then we got like a gameplay trailer that was a big chunk of
and a
gameplay.
chunk. Yeah.
So they're on equal footing, pretty much, is what's been put out there so far. So.
Yeah. So I admit I am picking Ghost of Tsushima in part because it's the one I want to play.
You want to play the most, yeah.
But like, I really do think if I had to bet on one of these coming out, I would say it's this. I feel like there's a very strong chance that Last of Us 2 could also make it, but it also wouldn't shock me if Last of Us 2 got delayed to Q1.
The spacing makes sense, too.
Just because Naughty Dog's got to do their thing.
Yeah.
And Naughty Dog sometimes finds they need another quarter.
Yeah. The spacing makes sense, though, too. If
does.
you have Ghost of Tsushima in August, and then 3.5 months later, you get The Last of Us Part 2.
And then maybe you manage to get Death Stranding out in March.
Yep, before the end of the fiscal.
And that's your fiscal year.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty strong fucking fiscal year right there.
It is. And then and then that fall.
And then you can roll right into PS5.
PlayStation 5. You have all these hot games you just released that will play on the PlayStation 5. It's all starting to all the pieces are kind of starting to fall into place.
Yeah,
so maybe it's not that far-fetched that all three of these games come out.
It still doesn't quite explain why they're skipping E3,
No,
but like it's
it really doesn't.
It feels like there's more to that story than we even originally thought.
Yeah, I mean, apparently they don't want people to play these games before they come out, or they're going to do PSX and let people play in there. Yeah, it's weird. But if PSX happens, or if we wait till PSX, then the year's over. So,
right.
Or maybe they bump up PSX this year. Who knows?
I'll tell you this much: if you really want to see what Death Stranding plays like, I bet you're going to see it at the Game Awards.
Yeah. I mean,
that's
the
not
bromance is going to make it happen.
That's not a crazy bet because of Keely's relationship with Kojima, but I feel like the timing is right for that to be like, I think you're going to see the first kind of actually what do you do gameplay demo there, and you're going to get a release date.
All right. You heard it here first on GameFace, folks.
Although some of that's probably contingent on whether PSX is that same week.
Yeah.
Which it often is.
It is, yeah. All right, well, let's set that. Actually, this topic segues perfectly into the next one, which is another first-party exclusive for PlayStation 4, and that is Days Gone.
The one nobody really cares about anymore.
You're right. Like, it seems like, and I can look at the numbers on Sifted, and I can tell that, there's always a natural curve. Game announced, spikes, goes down, down.
First big blowout.
Big blowout goes back, and it's just every game follows it.
Yeah.
But for this game in particular, the drop has been more precipitous. Like, it's noticeable. And, I mean, it goes back even to our draft at the beginning part of the year. I'm putting together a list, and I'm like, man, I don't even know if I can even draft this game.
Yeah.
I did, though.
You did.
And
I intentionally didn't. I don't want it on my team.
Yeah. So
I'm probably going to review just fine, but for some reason, this game annoys me, and I don't know why.
I think part of it may be the initial round of previews that were done for this game were not really auspicious.
No.
And the footage that they gave to Game Informer, which we're probably going to see here in a minute, was not great. And if you read the previews from Game Informer, who kind of had the exclusive look at the game, the previews weren't exactly
Yeah, it
glowing.
really felt kind of like, it's a game.
Yeah,
and you can play it.
That's kind of what
It's
it
like
was.
It wasn't negative. It was just sort of like,
It was
here
just
it is.
not encouraging.
Yeah.
And that you want encouragement when you're talking about a first-party exclusive. So
Here it is. Star Killer's a biker now.
yeah. So Sony has given some outlets an updated look at this game. And probably the most common thread amongst every outlet who got to check it out again was, holy crap, this is like an entirely different video game from when I saw it the last time. It's been like 8 months?
Like that last delay apparently was not just for polish.
No, they've made huge changes to the game in the last half year.
What they're describing is not the game I watched played for half an hour at E3 last year at all.
No.
Like, none of this was there.
Yeah. Well, they've changed everything, and I've been taking notes on the coverage over the last 4 or 5 days, and we're just going to run through some of the stuff that, to me, were the biggest changes. Probably the biggest of them all is that story-wise, there's now player choice. So there's one scenario where one of your allies has a shotgun, or he loans you a shotgun, and he asks for it back, and you have the choice of giving it back to him or being selfish and keeping it. You keep it, you have the shotgun for the rest of the game, which makes the rest of the game easier. You don't, you soil the relationship with the friend, and then maybe he's not there to get your back later on in the game. This was never mentioned about this game. In fact, people who had played the same exact section of the game earlier, Deacon just gave the shotgun to him. You didn't have the choice to keep it if you didn't want to. And there were a few other instances of player choice in the first couple hours of the game. So people are just like, what? How do you incorporate something like that so late in the ball game and have it actually have significant ramifications on down the line inside the game? I would think that that's not something Sucker Punch would just do haphazardly.
Sucker Punch might not, but I don't know about Sony Ben.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. You're right, though. Or you mean Sony. Maybe that's a decision that Sony made. And Sony Ben was just like, well, we're just going to have to do it because they're paying for this damn game to be made. I don't know. But it's crazy to see
and they've been paying for it for a long time.
Yeah. I cannot remember.
Is this another 7-year?
Yeah.
Getting
maybe a
up
little
there.
less. 5,
Yeah.
I guess, at this point.
I don't know how long they worked on it before the announcement.
Right. But I don't even think it's been 5 years since it was announced. I think it's been 3 since it was announced.
Really?
Yeah.
Feels like 5.
It does feel like forever. I agree with you. Because it typically, the way PlayStation works is, unless you're talking about Naughty Dog or Kojima, they don't have gigantic marketing things beforehand. I think God of War, we knew about it, a year before it came out?
Yeah, about that.
Yeah, and that's pretty typical for Sony.
There's been rumors, but the actual announcement.
Here it is. Now you're playing it about a year.
Went into full production January 2015.
Yeah.
So 4 years now. A little over 4 years.
Yep, that's what I thought. I thought it was
It's
4 or
reasonable.
5. That's reasonable, yeah. So somehow they've managed to get player choice into the game in the span of 6 months, or maybe it was something they were always working on, didn't think they were going to use, and then ultimately decided, you know what, we're going to put it in the game.
Well, maybe you get that 8-month window, and they're like, oh, I bet we can do that now.
Or maybe that's what they got the 8-month window for.
Could have been. Like, I don't. Some of this was probably like target of opportunity.
Yeah.
But like, they were not idle.
Oh, no.
During this delay.
Let's keep rolling because there's a ton we got to get to. They added cinematics to the game. So sections of the game where before there was just text that popped up or like a voiceover, they went and added full-blown cinematics to flesh out the story there. Also, it was announced this week that there are 6 hours of cinematics in this game. Yeah. 6 hours.
That's about on par with like Sony's other cinematic stuff.
So they've said already, direct from Sony Bend, that this game is 30 hours long. Mm-hmm. So that's 1/5 of the game is cinematics.
Worked for Kingdom Hearts.
Yeah, or did it? I skipped them all, so I wouldn't know, honestly.
Well, I'm pretty sure this game will probably will also be about the value of friendship on it. You can see that warming up.
But I don't know. That seems extreme to me. 6 hours of cinematics for a 30-hour game. That seems like a big percentage of it.
A lot of time to spend with Sam Witwer.
Yeah, Deacon. His name's Deacon. They added a tutorial to the game, which apparently before there was no tutorial.
That's good. Yes, that would be a positive thing to add.
Yeah, which is like you would think that that's just like creating the game 101. Let's have a freaking tutorial.
AAA first-party game doesn't have a tutorial? Like that's.
But they've added one, and they said it's very good, and it's very descriptive and easy to follow.
Not that they tell us if it wasn't. It's like, we added a tutorial. It's kind of terrible, but like you got to play it anyway. So what are you going to do?
And then a lot of stuff is they just showed it for the first time, or they further explain things. So there are multiple human groups, like factions, that you can work with. And you can establish trade between like your homestead and the other human groups. People are wondering why, if Deacon was such a hardcore biker, why are you building his bike in the game? And it turns out that his bike is stolen. So he does have like a badass motorcycle. And
I knew that.
I don't know. Apparently it's new information.
I feel like I'd heard that before. I don't know. Sometimes you hear things and
yeah. But apparently his bike gets stolen, and so you have to rebuild his bike from scratch throughout the course of the game.
I enjoyed that in Mad Max, too.
Well, the other cool thing about it is that they just talked about for the first time, is that you can like look through cars and rummage cars and get parts from cars and then use them on your bike to craft with. So it's not like you're just walking around and there's like this icon of like nuts and bolts that you pick up. You physically interact with other machines to get parts from those machines to help build your bike, which I think is a nice little touch.
So they've basically turned the motorcycle as a relationship there.
Yep.
In the way there's a relationship with your horse.
Yep.
In Red
Pretty
Dead.
much, yeah.
But when Sam Witwer gets on the bike, he probably doesn't say "boy."
No, or maybe he does.
Maybe he does.
Depends on what he names his motorcycle.
Motorcycle boy.
Yeah, the other thing that
that's what Sony sidekicks have to be called boy.
Boy.
It seems to be the horses and sons and motorcycles.
All boys.
All boys.
Apparently, stealth is like the game. It's a stealth game, which I thought there was kind of like an option that you could play stealthy, but that's really not the case. It is primarily a stealth game. So there are audio and visual indicators. First of all, there's a radar, which you never see in any of the footage.
All bikers have that.
Yeah, but there's like a
they don't talk about it, but they have radar. They know that.
So there is a radar map / radar thing in the bottom right, I think it is, corner of the screen, which they haven't shown yet. And of course, it shows you enemies and things like that on the map and objects of interest. But it also has audio and visual indicators to help you know whether you're hidden or not. So I guess if an enemy can hear you, there'll be like pings that flash from that direction. There are distraction techniques, so you can throw stuff to try to distract enemies and get them to go one direction so you can sneak another direction. The crossbow is the most important weapon in the game, and there's different bolts that you can get for the crossbow.
Big fans of Daryl, I guess.
Yep. And there are stealth kills, which I think every video game in existence at this point has stealth kills. But stealth, it's a stealth game. They basically said because there are so many freakers in the game, that going full ham with all your guns blazing, basically you're going to die. They said that the motorcycle becomes, if you decide to play the game that way, the motorcycle becomes like an escape hatch. That you'll eventually get overwhelmed. You need to hop on the motorcycle and then you need to ride and get away. But then they also said that there is some wildlife in the game that can run as fast as your motorcycle. So there are wolves that get infected and they become like superhuman. I guess superhuman isn't the right word to use.
Super wolven.
Super wolven. And they can run as fast as your motorcycle. So it appears that Sony Bend has tried to balance the game, at least as well as it can.
That's when you really wish you'd kept that shotgun.
Yep, exactly. Exactly. But that's the other thing, too. So because some animals can run as fast as you, combat from the motorcycle is another big part of the game. And they said it's very intuitive and easy. There's a healthy auto lock that locks onto enemies. But they said that it's a big part of it. Like a lot of times you have to fight other guys who are on motorcycles riding alongside you, or you have to fight the wildlife that's running alongside you. What else? There are random events that happen in the world. This is an open world game. It really is, in every sense of the word. I didn't know if it was going to be like a faux open world game, like some of the ones that we get these days.
Like God of War.
Yeah, that's a good example.
God of War is a faux-open world game.
Faux-open. Did you just make that up?
Yeah.
That's awesome. It's a faux-open world game. Anthem is a faux-open world game.
Anthem's a Schluter.
A loot shooter.
There's people that's trying to get that to catch on. Schluter. And like, we need to stop those people at all costs.
We do. And we will. We'll do our part on Sifted to make sure that verbiage never appears on the site. But random events happen as you're going across the open world. Freakers will lay traps and ambushes for you. And there are also freaker nests, which, like every other open world game, are basically forts that you have to invade, kill everything and take over, and then that will necessitate fast travel across the open world. What else? Tracking is a big part of the game. So then they said this was also one of the biggest changes from the first time they saw the game was, and the first time they saw it, one of your sidekicks was the tracker, and you didn't really do any of the tracking. You relied on him.
Yeah, he was like the more experienced guy.
Yep, this guy right here, actually. Good job, Sam. That's the guy. So originally he was like your tracker.
I thought this was the tutorial. Yeah. Where like the guy teaches you how to track, and now you know how to track.
Right. Well, originally that guy was the tracker. Now Deacon does a lot of the tracking all on his own. So some of the abilities that were handed to this sidekick have now been imbued upon Deacon. So, yeah, that's 6 months. Everything I just talked about are changes that were made to this game in 6 months. And I have to say that I am way more excited for this game now. Way more. I really had just kind of become numb to this game and didn't care. After reading all this preview coverage, it sounds like it might be awesome.
I wouldn't go that far.
I don't know.
It looks so bland to me. So I'm still gonna play it. Like I like open world stuff. I like I like the idea of like having this open world game, but like a horde of monsters on like super fast zombies could show up at any minute and like ruin everything. Like that's cool. But like it's just I don't know exactly how to explain it. I look at it and I don't care at all. Like I don't care about that character. I don't care about this world. There's no interest to it. It looks like really weirdly generic.
Well, they also, like the new footage that they released for this in the last couple of days shows Deacon before it all happened. And he's like this preppy, like, I don't know, he looks like he was a part of like Blink 182 or something, but he's got like this gorgeous wife and like he's living this great life. And so it's pretty interesting that they're going to at least show you some of his backstory a little bit. And I think that, to me, is what goes a long way in making me care about a game or not.
Yeah, I mean,
is how the human characters interact with each other.
I mean, as long as it feels good to play, like I can get absorbed in an open world. It'll be fun.
That is my fear, though, Matt, is that it's going to be clunky to play.
It might be. I don't know.
It looks clunky watching it.
It does look a little
played.
bit.
Yeah.
I mean, this is old footage, but
it is.
Yeah, there's nothing in it that makes me, watching 5 to 10 seconds of Horizon Zero Dawn, I knew that game was like going to click for me.
Yep.
Watching this, I'm just like, I don't know. I'm worried that this game is going to be like a collection of cool ideas that I've seen that done better in like 5 other games. And maybe they've never been put together in this combination before, but if you don't execute on it, it's not going to matter. But maybe they will. Like I can't judge that yet. I haven't played it myself. I've just watched it played for 20 minutes or so, and watched all the demo, the footage that they put out. I'm not gonna pass on it. I keep every time I see it, I feel like a question mark appears above my. I feel like I turn into a Metal Gear guard that just thinks he saw Solid Snake. I'm like, what was that noise?
I'll say I was right there with you up until this week. But the reports, the new gameplay footage that I saw definitely jacked up my anticipation.
Yeah, the new reports definitely make me feel better.
Yeah.
For sure. But we'll see.
Yeah. I still feel like it could have an element of Euro jank, even though it's not made in Europe.
Yeah.
It just looks like, after you've played games for a long time, I hate to say it, but you can kind of watch them and tell if like the combat's responsive, if it feels good.
And this is the first thing that this developer's made on this scale, right?
Yeah. Pretty much.
Not first time develop. I mean, look.
Some knock it out of the park.
Darksiders 1 was a first game out of that company. I mean,
yeah.
And that was no lack of ambition on that one.
Nope.
So,
I mean, it happens sometimes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So.
And Sony, Sony doesn't put out, first party garbage.
Yeah.
Really, I'm sure that they've spent some time trying to make sure this is up to their standards, but it's just the premise does not ignite curiosity or excitement in me, and I get that's a me thing. It's not doesn't mean people shouldn't be allowed to make biker games about zombies.
You're not putting the kibosh on that.
No, just maybe not for me, but maybe it is for me. I don't know. Maybe this game could turn me around on the biker post-apocalyptic zombie
horde shooter genre.
Maybe this is what I've been waiting for all of my life. I don't know.
Well, the good news is it's 5 weeks away. It comes out at like the end of April, and so there's not much longer to wait. There's not much longer to wait for a big first-party game from Sony. So I'm excited for this game. It's coming now. It's not like this pipe dream. There's really no concern left for me at this point that it's going to get delayed again. So I'm starting to move into the acceptance stage that the game's coming out, and that it's a first-party PlayStation 4 exclusive, and all the stuff that comes along with that, and I am undoubtedly starting to get really excited for it.
I am at the point where I am at least feeling like it's going to be better than nothing.
Okay.
So
I'll take that.
That is
That's
not.
what you can get.
I don't always feel that way about games. It's sometimes it's just like, oh, that's coming out. I'm going to have to play it because we have to talk about it, and I don't really want to do that, but I guess I'm going to have to do it.
Yeah.
And that would be a pretty good segue, but we got one more thing to talk about.
Yep. All right, we're going to move on. You guys may not know this, and it's hard to believe, but this is the Switch's 2-year anniversary. It literally happened this week. It's been on the market for 2 years now. And we just want to take a look back at the first 2 years of the Switch, kind of compare it to the first couple years for other Nintendo platforms, and then we're going to give it a grade for Nintendo's first 2 years. So in preparation for this, I started basically collecting all the games that have come out for the Switch in the first 2 years, and it's pretty impressive. First party, it's very impressive. I honestly think you could argue from a first-party software output perspective that the Switch is the best Nintendo console ever in the first 2 years. Can you think of a Nintendo console that had better first-party support in its first 2 years than Switch? I can't.
I can think of ones that had more first-party support of interest to me. I feel like they have kind of dropped that ball.
Okay, well, what console would that be and why?
I was more happy with the early output on the GameCube.
Really?
But that was just because of my interest at the time. And
because the launch of GameCube was really weak.
Yeah, and it was, but it had stuff like Rogue Squadron, and Melee was right on the heels.
Luigi's Mansion.
Luigi's Mansion was pretty good. I felt pretty good about the GameCube for the most part, which was not a common opinion at the time, I recognize. And I also like the Super Nintendo was strong out of the gate.
Super Mario Sunshine, did that come out in the first 2 years of GameCube?
Yes.
Did it?
Yeah, I think it was the year after.
Yeah, I guess it was. Second year. Yeah, that was second year.
Yeah. And then Wind Waker was like a year after that.
Yeah, so that's not the first 2 years.
It's not the first 2 years.
And Eternal Darkness, was that first 2 years?
Can't remember. Eternal Darkness was great.
It was, yeah.
I don't know.
So there's like 4 really good games first 2 years.
Yeah.
We'll give it Eternal Darkness. So let's say there's 4.
Yeah.
Look at Switch, man.
I can think of 2.
Okay.
So.
I'll just run down them really quickly. Breath of the Wild, Super Mario Odyssey,
2.
Splatoon 2.
Don't care.
Mario Kart 8.
Really don't care.
Really?
Yeah, I already played it on Wii U. I don't care.
I'm
not a Mario Kart
Smash
fan.
Brothers Ultimate, ARMS, Mario Tennis.
care.
I mean,
Mario Tennis? Really?
I'm just saying.
You didn't even like that much.
I didn't like it that much, but it's still a good game. And I'm just saying, you look at the quantity of first-party stuff, most of it really high quality. In the first 2 years of Switch, I don't think there's another Nintendo console that comes close.
In terms of volume, probably not.
Yeah. I mean, even if you
Nintendo has never been super prolific about that kind of thing.
Yeah, but it's changed.
They've made it because I think you're finally also in the point where they've realized they're kind of on their own on that.
Well, I think the other thing that's helping is something that I talked about years ago on GameFace, which was if you unify those development studios and they're all creating games for one platform instead of splitting them across a console and a handheld, you probably have enough to support yourself. And I think that's exactly what's happening. I mean, the 3DS is winding down.
It's been a little slow to happen, but it's clearly getting there.
Yeah, I mean, there's no sign of a successor to 3DS. No, there might be.
I think you see it I think you see that most clearly in the new this year's schedule.
Yeah.
Like they they clearly have enough to kind of fill out each quarter, and it's probably because they don't have to use up teams keeping the 3DS in games.
Yeah, and it may stay that way. Like Nintendo may not release another a successor to 3DS. Like this might be it.
Yeah, I mean, I think for the foreseeable future, I would say that's true. Yeah,
and I just think it's just paying huge dividends. I mean, you look across.
It beats the hell out of the Wii U.
Man, it annihilates the Wii. I mean, I think it annihilates every Nintendo console. The only one that I was a little bit shaky on was the SNES.
In terms of the first 2 years?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the first 2 years of the Super Nintendo and the first 2 years of the GameCube were better to me than this. Although, for me, the problem with the Switch for me is that the first year is fucking amazing, and the second year was complete dead zone to me.
Yeah.
Like there was almost nothing last year that
you're not a big Smash player.
I like Smash. I mean, Smash and Pokemon Let's Go were the two best things from the first party last year. I mean, they're the only major things really. But I like Pokemon a lot, and I thought Smash was good. I thought it was a solid kind of ultimate. It was exactly what it said. It was ultimate. It had everything. And I played it for a while, and then I was done, and that was it. But it was great. It was cool. I was glad Simon Belmont finally got in there. But in terms of stuff that really keep me playing and coming back to them, the Switch didn't have much last year. Whereas I played a whole lot of Zelda. I played a whole lot of Mario, and those both the Zelda and the Mario games. While I don't think the Zelda game is the end-all be-all of video gaming ever made, that some people seem to think, I would put both Zelda and Odyssey in the upper third of their franchises. So
for sure.
You can't really ask for more than that in a single year. That two of the biggest franchises in video game history get two of their better entries on the same system in a launch year. That is about as good as it gets.
And look, I love Splatoon. So Splatoon 2 to me, that's a gigantic release. Pokemon Let's Go, that's a gigantic release. Smash Brothers Ultimate, that's a gigantic release. ARMS is a new IP. Not a gigantic release, but
an
a
admirable
good filler.
attempt.
But that's what I'm talking about. There's you have the big boys, and then you have the little filler games like ARMS, like we're seeing right now, or like Mario Tennis, or the port of Mario Kart 8 to Switch. For a lot of people who didn't have a Wii U, that's probably the game they play on Switch more than any other one, if you think about it.
That would not surprise me that that's the most played game.
Yeah, if you really looked at the logs and the hours that people are spending, I would guess Mario Kart 8 is probably the most played game on Switch. So, I mean, I did go back and look at the Super Nintendo, and I was like, no, it can't hang with Switch. It's crazy, what Nintendo has done with Switch. I mean, it only has so many IP, but if you think about it, what's left? There's Metroid, and Fire Emblem's about to come out.
Animal Crossing. The big 5 Nintendo franchises right now by sales are Mario, Zelda,
Smash
Brothers, and then Animal Crossing and Splatoon. Splatoon.
Yeah.
Like those, Splatoon and Animal Crossing are like round out the big five now. Like people haven't really gotten their head around that yet. But like Splatoon's huge. I don't care about it, but it's huge because it's just, in part because it's the only thing like itself Nintendo has, but also because
I still play it.
Like the character design has caught the imagination of the fandom. Like it's an instantly recognizable thing.
It's different,
and like
that's why I play it.
And so that's
it's different.
So like you can't, and sales wise, Splatoon 2 puts it in the number 5 slot.
Yeah.
Splatoon is a major force now, and so is Animal Crossing. So Animal Crossing is the last thing of Nintendo's biggest franchises that needs to hit the Switch, and of course most people do believe it will.
But it is crazy that we're literally 24 months into the console and we're scraping trying to find IP that hasn't hit Switch.
Yeah, well at this point you just want more of it.
Yeah.
You want another Zelda game. You
right.
Want another, whereas opposed there used to, you remember there used to be almost a tradition with Nintendo systems was like waiting for the Zelda.
Yep.
Waiting for the Zelda.
Not now. This one came out at the beginning.
And then what was it? Wii U, you never even got to Zelda.
Nope.
I mean,
we waited all day long.
You did.
All gen long.
But by that point, it was like, well, I might as well just get the new system.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
The only other time was like the Wii, which launched with the Zelda.
Yep. And that too. So I was like, okay, surely the Wii had a better first 2 years.
No, not at all.
No, not at all. Like, I literally think.
Wii was. Remember and also remember the Wii. And in retrospect, of course, he wasn't wrong in terms of sales. But the second year, there was a second year of the Wii where like he came out of that weird press conference and Keighley asked Reggie like, "Where are the games?"
Yeah.
And
He's
Reggie,
like, what do you mean?
Reggie's like, "We gave you Animal Crossing," and Jeff was like, "Come on."
Yeah.
And like, but sales wise, Reggie was correct. It was one of their big things. But in terms of like the core gamer demographic, like that's not what we're looking for. I mean, we will play Animal Crossing, obviously. Yeah. But like we're not looking for. That's not where the hype is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I just kept going, and I was like, okay, well, not the Wii, and I just kept going back and back and back until I got to the NES, and I was like, the Switch is the best Nintendo console ever made.
Not to me.
Think about it. So you have all that great first-party output for the first 2 years, which, in my opinion, no other console comes close from Nintendo. Then you start thinking about what it's done with the indies, that it's got at least a portion of the third parties to come back and play a little bit. I don't think it's going to hold, but the funny part is, and why I came to the conclusion that the Switch...
I think the indie stuff ended up being more important, oddly enough.
Than I ever would have dreamed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't even believe how big it is on the Switch. But I think what really brought me to the conclusion that the Switch is the best Nintendo console and for the first 2 years is because most Nintendo consoles are dead after 2 years. It's like if you look at like the Wii... the GameCube, the Wii U, after the first 2 years, it was just a trickle of software. And, I mean, Switch, it just looks like it's on this upward trajectory, and it's just going to keep on going. And Nintendo's being smart with buying some of the third-party stuff, like it's doing with Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3 and Bayonetta. Everything is coalescing right now for Nintendo. To me, the only really big misstep that it's had is Metroid. Giving Metroid to Bandai Namco was a dumb idea from the beginning. It's a dumb idea now, and I could have told Nintendo that it's probably going to end up having to scrap the project and go somewhere else, which it did. So that is one part that sucks, but Metroid's also the only IP left for Switch. There just aren't any left. Like, Nintendo's got them all out in 2 years. That, to me, is amazing. Particularly looking at the track record of Nintendo over the past, 15 years. Mm-hmm. And look, I feel like we've been pretty hard on Switch. Myself, I think you have as well. And rightfully so. I think we've called out things that are legitimately problems. But I think we also have to admit at a certain point that Nintendo has played its cards right.
Yeah, well, you can't argue with the financial
success. Yeah.
But I can certainly argue with the fact that I have more of my favorite games on Super Nintendo and GameCube.
Yeah.
And,
I mean, that's you. In
the end, maybe the Switch library will turn that around for me. But right now, I'm going back to where Link to the Past is, or where the Metroid Primes are, and maybe Metroid Prime 4 could turn me around on that. I don't know. We're way early in the Switch's existence.
Prime came out in the first 2 years.
The library is not settled by any means.
Yeah, absolutely.
They get another Zelda game out with a template of Breath of the Wild, but actually has real dungeons in it. That could be my favorite Zelda game ever.
It's true.
So we'll see. There's a lot of potential there. Maybe this Pokemon game is going to, maybe Sword and Shield is going to be one of the greatest things I've ever played in the series. Like, that could be a big thing for me. I know you're not as much of a Pokemon fan as I am.
Yeah.
But, like, there's potential there. I think year 2 was for me, and what my interests are, was extremely weak. And, a letdown after year 1, although almost anything would have been a letdown after year 1.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, I think the first 3 years of Switch are going to be what define it to me, because year 2 was a bust, but year 3 is looking a lot better right now. There's a lot of stuff
this year looks amazing.
There's a lot of stuff this year that I think looks way more interesting and way more exciting than anything they did last year.
I'm telling you, I think the Switch is going to be Nintendo's best console ever.
I have a hard time. There's just an era of the time. It's like I always say, the golden era of science fiction is 12, because when you were 12,
right? You're gullible enough.
There's a time. There's a time and place that makes something special as much as its own quality. The stuff that I played and when I played it and why I enjoyed it when it was during the GameCube and the Super Nintendo, it's going to be hard for something to beat that when I'm 43. But
you're putting on your nostalgia goggles though.
But everything is that though. The Switch library is not necessarily going to be more appealing to me than ActRaiser. I love ActRaiser, and someone who played it for the first time today would not love it the way I loved it. But
I don't know about that.
But there was a point when when my friend got that Super Famicom imported, and we put ActRaiser in, and we had never heard music that sounded like that come out of a freaking cartridge.
I hear that. There's no Switch game that's ever going to impact me the way Super Mario 64 did. It's just not going to happen. No Switch game is ever going to affect me the way that Ocarina of Time did the first time I played it. But I feel like I do have the ability to kind of scrape those feelings off the top a little bit and just look at just the data. And then if you want to go the Metacritic route and say, what's the average review score per game, you can. But I think just anecdotally, as someone who's been doing this a long time and been living and breathing video games since I was 4 years old, I don't know, man. I think it's just overwhelming that the Switch is Nintendo's best console ever.
Well, I think that's extremely subjective, and I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, let's look. We're going into year 3 here, Matt. What did I say earlier? I said by year 3... Nintendo consoles are basically done. It has been that way
since the N64.
Since the N64. Since 1996. We're now in 2019.
Year 3 of the post Super Nintendo. Year 3 is sort of where you hit the point where the third parties sort of give up.
Yep.
And it's just sort of you're waiting each quarter for that Nintendo release.
Right. And you get 3 or 4 first party games.
It's when the system becomes the Nintendo box.
Yeah. Look at year 3 for Switch, man.
Okay,
this is going to be an awesome year.
But
and there's still at least a handful of games that probably aren't coming out till 2020 that are going to be really good.
Right, but what I'm saying is that doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to like those games better than the games I like from their other systems, even if the output was a trickle by year 3. And I don't know. Congratulations on Nintendo for making it to year 3 without completely blowing it, I guess.
But it hasn't done that since the SNES.
True. I mean, now they blew it on the Wii.
Year 3 done. But the Wii was done by year 3.
Yeah, it was still selling very well, but
because people were just playing Wii Sports.
Yeah, but it's they weren't selling software.
Right.
I mean, the fact that they only sold 12 million copies of Super Mario Galaxy on a system that 110 million units sold?
Think about that.
That's crazy.
They should have sold so much more software.
Imagine if the Wii...
But that showed you the audience that had the Wii.
Oh, right. But imagine if the Wii had the attach rate of the Switch.
Right.
Imagine if they sold 80 million copies of Super Mario Galaxy.
That's pretty much that. If you extrapolate it out, that's what the number would be. That's where they're sitting with Switch. So I've been tough on Nintendo. I did not think the Switch was going to be the hit that it is. I fully admitted that I was wrong about that, and I am fully admitting right now that I am absolutely wrong about the Switch, and I do think that ultimately, when it's all said and done, it's going to be known as Nintendo's best platform.
I think it'll be definitely known as one of them, and it'll be the people who are kids now. I don't know if Nintendo's ever going to top this system for them, in the same way that I don't think they're ever going to top the Super Nintendo for me.
Right.
But again, the Switch remains my least played of the 3 consoles right now, just because it's still sort of...
No, you're right.
And
Mine too. I mean, I fully admit I play my Switch the least of all three.
And the other thing is,
although I will say now it's probably above Xbox.
And I will say I did go on. I went on the eShop to get Travis Strikes Again like a week or so ago because I had enough people that I trust say that like you'll like it. It's good. Like it's really good. Don't be afraid of it because it's not a traditional No More Heroes game. So I went and I got it. But I will say that and I do like it. It is pretty good.
Also a Switch exclusive.
Yeah. And but I will say this. I went on because it hadn't been. It only came out a few weeks before.
Yeah.
So I decided to just go to the game list and just sort of scroll through it to get to it. Two things. First off, goddamn, a lot of stuff comes out on the eShop. But the caveat to that is, wow, a lot of it is complete shovelware garbage.
Yeah.
Like
we've stopped adding. Like,
it's astounding how much stuff in there is like a $10 version of a free-to-play mobile game.
We've stopped adding a lot of Switch games to the Sifted database.
And I went down and down and down, and finally there was Travis Strikes Again, and I got it. But it's like I had not seen the eShop in a while, like probably a couple months, and like I was not ready for the shovelware.
I mean,
damage.
Valve has a sorting problem. Nintendo already has one too.
Like I want a button that just is like, show me games that I care about. I know that's not a possibility, but it's just
you want a Sifted on the eShop,
really,
basically.
Exactly.
That's what it comes down to. You want something that's going to cut through the clutter, which was the whole idea behind the site in the first place. So,
like, was this on a phone at one point? Do not show it to me then. Like, which I think would cut out like 60% of what is in the new release column.
It's so bad that we basically had to set a rule that any Switch game that is announced that is more than 3 years old, we're not curating, we're not adding that game to the database, we're not curating content for that game.
But then there's definitely the argument that seeing that still looks healthier than standing in the N64 section of a GameStop in 1998 and watching the tumbleweeds roll through,
Yeah, seeing the boxes
and they
that have
still
been
want
there
$69.99 for Kirby, for God's sake. I can't do work with this. What are you doing?
All right, so it's the 2-year anniversary. We're going to give letter grades for the Switch's first 2 years. I think it's obvious already. I give it an A+. What about you?
I can give it like a B.
Okay.
Like a B or a B minus. Like the year 1 is an A+. Year 2 is like a D. So like average it out to like kind of like a B minus.
Yeah. Okay.
And I'm hoping that year 3 will pull the average up to like more of a B+ range.
Yeah.
And then they will get a substantial amount of extra credit if Metroid Prime 4 does not suck.
Or if it ever comes out for the Switch.
Yeah, I mean, they got some time.
I'm starting to wonder.
There are many assignments between now and then before you have to worry about your final grade for Metroid Prime 4, Nintendo. I realize that's a ways out.
Absolutely. So I
might be on the Switch too. We don't know.
Yeah.
I'm also very curious to see what this revision is.
Yeah.
That seems to be probably real.
Seems to be happening. But I'm interested to hear from you guys, too. So in the comments, let us know your letter grades for the first 2 years of Switch. I think no matter what, I think everybody at least has to be a little pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, I mean...
I never would have dreamed they'd get this much software
It's definitely the best thing they've done in regards to, figuring out how to play the game and play the market properly.
Yeah. They're starting to figure it out. Ever.
I was in high school. I mean, it's been a long time since a Nintendo system was dominant. The Wii was, but the Wii was a fad for grandparents who wanted to play the bowling game. Like it wasn't, they didn't sell that to us. They didn't sell it for us, and the Wii, large part of the Wii U's failure was because they thought those people were
sold to us.
They thought those people were going to come with them, and they didn't. And so then they make the Switch, which specifically targets the people who stuck with them for the Wii U and added something appealing to someone who didn't want to buy a Wii U, but was not trying to get the people that bought the Wii and never took the Wii Sports disc out of it.
Even though it still has motion controls.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a fan of that.
They still have that one toe back in the past.
But that also, I feel like you also sort of need to keep supporting that because there are games you want to bring forward from the
Why
previous
haven't
generation.
they made Switch Sports?
I don't know. It's a good question.
There is literally hundreds of millions of dollars just sitting on the table with Switch Sports, guaranteed. Yeah. Even if they just updated like the bowling and the tennis from Wii Sports, like I know they kind of did that on Wii U. They made like a high-res version of it or whatever.
So you really rated an A+.
Yeah.
Like even with the online crap and,
Yeah.
the terrible voice app.
Yeah,
thing.
absolutely. Yep. Yeah.
Well then, where will they go when that's better? We'll get an A++.
Well, it took them 20-some years to get this A+, so well, who's to say they'll ever get that back?
You're not too worried about that.
Seriously. This may be the last time it ever even it sniffs an A+. And that's for the first 2 years. So year 3, year 4, it could start going down the crapper. I don't see that happening, though. That's the crazy thing. Like, I just don't see the momentum dying for this the way it did with all Nintendo's other platforms. So kudos, Nintendo, man. You've knocked it out of the park. It will be interesting to see how this new leadership team in both Japan and the U.S. sort of shepherd this platform through its last 3 years. They could totally screw it up. Like, they really could. So we'll see. But for the first 2 years, man, I have no qualms about giving the Switch an A+. None. I'm shocked that I'm saying this, considering where I was like 2 weeks before it came out. I never thought that I would be at this place 2 years later, but here I am. Yeah, I just think Nintendo's just killing it. And I think the money backs it all up. They're making money hand over fist. So there you go. Switch 2-year anniversary. Which brings us to the last topic for GameFace 159, and that is the big game that just came out today, Devil May Cry 5. So talked about this when the open beta was out there. I played it, and it was a very small. It's funny now that I'm playing the full game to realize how small that section was of the demo. It's also crazy to think about how that demo was different parts of the game snapped together. Like when you play the full game, you see the area where the demo was, but what you experienced right before it and right after it is completely different. So Capcom did a good bit of work on that demo to make it something that people could play and actually enjoy. But playing the full thing now, I am on mission 7 or 8. I wish I had more time to play this week so I could, I was hoping I could finish it, but I just ran out of time. I didn't get to play as much as I want, but I am at mission 7, so I'm like, 5-6 hours into the game. You guys have seen the reviews. The aggregate right now on Metacritic is like an 87.
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about having this one on my team.
Absolutely. It's scoring really high.
I needed a morale boost after Anthem.
Right. Yeah. Well, it could be worse. You could have picked Left Behind, which is sitting at a 3.9.
They made another Left Behind game?
Oh, not Left Behind. The Square Enix game by the old Kojima folks.
Oh.
Oh, what's it called? Left Alive.
Okay.
Yeah.
I never would have remembered that.
Yeah. It's like at a 3 aggregate. 3 point something.
Wow. Between that and The Quiet Man, Square's really ripping it up.
Really having a great quarter. So I love this game. I have absolutely adored this game. I am having a blast. It is 1,000% a throwback to the PlayStation 2 era. No doubt. It's like there's loading everywhere. You load in a level, you play the level, you finish it, you go back.
You get your rating.
You get your rating. You go back to a static menu screen where you select next mission, and then that mission loads, and you just repeat the process over and over until the game is over. So it is ancient design. It literally is designed just like a PlayStation 2 game before open worlds ever existed. But I am 100% okay with that. This genre in particular, it doesn't need to be an open world game.
No, character action can just be itself.
Yeah. And
like Bayonetta shouldn't be open world. This shouldn't be open world. Like you can just make what they are, but make them better and slicker and tighter and crazier.
Yeah, and that is a good way to describe Devil May Cry 5.
Yeah.
And that's really a good way to describe it in general. It's bigger, it's prettier, it's more responsive, it's deeper. It's probably the best Devil May Cry made. I mean, I'm just going to go out on a limb and say it right now.
I'm only still pretty much in the prologue because it came out last night and I was at the movies and then I had to download it this morning and then you got here.
Yeah.
And that was pretty much, so I basically played like the first 2 levels of this while Shane and Sam talked about sports.
Yeah.
which is actually pretty common.
Yeah.
That's sort of our pre-production ritual.
Yeah, that is kind of how it goes.
I mean, I like it. I feel like a lot of stuff from Devil May Cry 4 has not changed and didn't need to
No,
be.
it's not.
The lock-on is still very important, like everything, like all the Devil May Cries. So, and I don't know if I'm gonna be in the end say that it's better than 3, because 3 is maybe the best game of this type ever made. But it feels good, and it feels like itself. And even this early on, I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna enjoy playing it because it feels nice. It's, and I like that they've kept the sort of batshit crazy writing and cutscene.
I think it's unintentional, but
I don't know. It's been that way for so long that, like, at this point, considering how production and translation and localization works, you have to be doing it on purpose.
Yeah.
Like, there's a bunch of things, and even early on, where I'm like, that's not a phrase, that's not a thing people say, but it does sound exactly like something that they'd have said in Devil May Cry 1 on the PlayStation 2. So I have to believe that is somehow intentional.
Yeah, and let's just get this out of the way right out of the gate. Do not buy this game for the story.
No, I think everybody knows.
Yeah, I mean, if you've played some people maybe have never played a Devil May Cry, and maybe they think finally they got a story in one that's good. Not good.
No, I mean, the cutscenes are a lot of fun because the action stuff is crazy choreographed, and they're doing a lot of,
the fight
things.
choreography actually is really good. Like, I love how they do the credits in this.
Yeah.
Where it's like this crazy slow motion swirling dervish where the van, Nico's van, and Nico is the girl that builds all your gadgets for you, and you go to her van to upgrade all your gear and everything. But you're traveling down the road, and basically you hit a jump, and the van is like flying through the air doing a spiral while Nero is in the air fighting creatures. It's awesome.
Was that in the E3 demo? Because that was the scene they showed. Maybe they skipped the credit part there.
Yeah, so the credits are like embedded into the scene.
But they're playing the song that everybody loved
Devil
so
Trigger,
much that then was on the Game Awards and everybody didn't like anymore.
Because it's bad.
Yeah. But it works in that scene.
It does. It absolutely does, yeah.
Like, it's Devil May Cry earns its butt rock in a way that very few games can.
Yep, you're absolutely right. So the story, the cinematics are absurd and dumb, and they say things that make no sense, and they make observations about things that no human being would ever make an observation. I mean, it's just
even like early on when who's the weird guy? Is it V?
V.
And Nero says something like, "You're a pretty interesting guy, V."
But that doesn't mean I believe you.
But that doesn't mean I don't believe you. Like, those two things don't contradict each other. There's no reason for a but in that. Like, those thoughts don't connect at all in English. I'm sorry. But it's like, that's exactly like when, like, in Devil May Cry 1, when the first boss, like, says something to Dante that I can't remember because the voice processing is so thick that I don't understand what he's saying. And Dante, like knocks him on his head and goes, "Hope you got some power in that big body." I'm like, no one would ever say that. No one. That's
this
not
game is just like that.
And like, but they nail that tone somehow.
They're very
in this
good
game.
at it. I'll say that much.
And like, there's it was just sort of weird and just sort of how video games were when Devil May Cry 1 came out, and now it's like
a thing.
Now games aren't like that anymore, and so the fact that this one does that so effectively kind of is charming.
It is a little bit. It's like, again, it's nostalgic. It makes you feel like you're playing a game that looks like it's made in 2019, but feels like it was made in 2005.
This is also sort of what like always annoyed me about like Nintendo stuff and other things, where I'm like, don't reinvent the whole franchise, just give me the game, but prettier and more. Yeah. And that is exactly what Devil May Cry 5 is. And,
pretty much.
And good. Like, great. Like, that's all I want from this is don't reinvent it as an open world shooter or whatever. Just make Devil May Cry with modern technology. And
I'm also surprised.
That's where we are. That's what they've done, and it's great.
I'm also surprised that the inserting the bug into the vagina thing is through the whole game. It wasn't just like this one little thing that you did in the demo.
That's just how hell does locks,
It's
I guess.
A puzzle element. Yeah, like, it's really freaking bizarre. And those of you who are wondering maybe what the backstory is for this game, it starts out, you're basically trying to rescue Dante. And so you and V, the guy with the cane and the dark hair, you're basically going into this labyrinth to take on this demon that Dante had gone to fight. You get there, Dante is basically dead. Everybody that went in to fight the demon is dead. It turns out that the demon is actually the one that took Nero's arm. And so you go in, you face this demon, you get your butt whooped, and basically Dante saves your ass. And so, but he's trapped in that other place. And so it's the initial thrust of the game is to go back and become powerful enough to go back and rescue Dante. Dante is not playable at the beginning of the game. Well, he is. There's like a epilogue or whatever that you play as him for a little bit. But he's not a part like of the opening game. You have to go and rescue him before he becomes a playable character. And
Just like
also,
4, really.
Yeah, and then also the area in the demo where they've shown him being played, you don't have him yet when you play that in the demo. So I'm assuming that they've already finished the game and they're going back and then playing as Dante when they're capturing that footage.
That seems like a pretty safe bet. You'll be able to play as Dante and Virgil.
Yeah. The one thing I would say that surprised me about this game, and maybe not in a good way, is it is pretty easy. I have it on, so when you start, there's 2 difficulty settings you can choose. I have it on the hardest one, which is the default one. And I've just been like walking through the game.
Yeah, well, there's other difficulties, so.
Well, yeah, you got to finish the
later.
game though to get to those.
Yeah.
I'm playing on the difficulty that everyone's going to play on, and I've always played DMC games on that difficulty. And this, to me, is one of the easier Devil May Cry games.
Well, it seems like they do give you like a chance to sort of figure out how things work and get there in a way that, because some of the other Devil May Cries, especially 3 just starts merciless.
Throws you to the wolves.
It's like, okay, if you don't know how to do anything, good luck.
Yeah, and the tutorials are great in this too. So if you haven't played prior Devil May Cry games, don't worry about it.
Although
the plot doesn't matter, so you don't have to worry about that.
If you haven't played prior ones, the one thing to know is lock on, lock on, lock on, lock on.
Yeah.
Like all the good moves pretty much require lock on.
You have to be locked. Yeah.
Up to and including the launcher. Like, you will have a much easier time if you learn to lock on effectively. And I know, like, especially in modern gaming, the temptation is just to run around without the lock on and whack at things. But, like, lock on is so important.
It really
you don't even have a dodge in this game unless in Devil May Cry unless you are locked on.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Once you're locked on, you do have a roll.
Yeah. And the other thing to remember is because it's Devil May Cry, your jump has invincibility frames at the beginning.
Yep.
So if you were about to be hit by something, and if you jump, it'll miss you.
Yep, you can jump out and jump
Some
away
people don't know. I didn't realize that people didn't know that about Devil May Cry until like this week. We're like, but that's been there, I think, since the beginning.
Yeah.
Is like jump, like you have iframes at the very beginning of the jump, so that's your kind of desperation move.
Yeah.
And I used that already on the first boss. Like it was. And it worked. It was like you get away with things that you think shouldn't work, but you can do it.
Now, some people may be sitting there right now saying, oh, well, Shane, you're saying that the game is easy, but you're only on the 7th mission. Or they're going to say, well, it's not about completing the game with Devil May Cry. It's about doing it with style, which I would agree with 1,000%. But getting at least an A in most skirmishes in this game is very easy. There's basically, you have 3 combat buttons. You have your hack and slash button, which is the triangle. You have your gun button, which is the square, and then you have your devil arm, which is the circle button. And basically, if you're in combat, you can just cycle through those buttons. You can go hack, gun, devil trigger, hack, gun, devil trigger, and if you just keep doing that on all the enemies, you'll get at least an A in pretty much every skirmish.
But isn't the A like a?
In this, it's for.
It's like isn't like a C in this? Doesn't it go up to like triple S?
No, A is I can't remember the word that they use for it. Crap. It goes up to S. So I got S on my first level. The second one I got an A.
I thought they would go up to triple S in this game.
I don't know.
Maybe that's only post game. I don't know.
I mean, if you look, it says only S, and I've only got as high as an S. But the A is right under S.
Yeah, but I think traditionally it's S, and then you have to get to SS and SSS.
Right. Those are all above A.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
so getting an A is more like getting a C.
No, there's C in this game.
Yeah, but I mean, it's in the middle.
Oh. I don't think you can get like more than a single S.
You can definitely get triple S in this game.
Like the first time through a mission?
I don't know. But I've already seen YouTube videos where they're like triple S.
Well, I know past Devil May Cry games, absolutely you could. But I don't know if in the past ones, could you get your first run?
I don't know.
I thought you could only get S on your first run, and you had to go back and play it again to get higher ones. Anyway, it's easy to get an A. An A is not mediocre because you can tell by the way the game treats you when you get an A. It's like it's a celebration. It's not like, oh, you suck at the game or whatever. And I didn't usually get A's in prior Devil May Cry games either, to be honest with you. Usually I just finished with a C and was like, that's good enough. And I just wanted to get through the game. So in general, I found this game to be much easier than prior Devil May Cry games. At least for me personally, it's been a lot easier.
It's not a terrible thing.
It's not at all. I mean, after you finish it, there are higher difficulties for people who really want to test their mettle. So don't be scared of this game. I know a lot of people may have picked up Devil May Cries in the past. Some of them are hard. Devil May Cry 4 was pretty hard at points.
Yeah. If this is too easy for you, well, Sekiro's right around the corner. So.
Yeah. Which, by the way, no
review copies.
Yeah.
Yeah. Questionable.
Which is weird because I reached out to Activision 2 days ago and was like, hey, I'm looking for Sekiro review code. And they're like, what platform do you want? And I was like, I told them. And they're like, okay. So, I don't know. Maybe they're just going to send me the code after it launches?
I think that sounds like what they're doing.
Yeah, which is weird.
Sounds like an Activision, just Activision being Activision. Although I have heard that there's some performance problems on console.
Oh, really?
But I don't know if that's true.
Yeah, the previews for that recently have been pretty encouraging.
Yeah, they had a big blowout preview thing.
Yep.
I'm surprised they're holding back review copies considering how positive that all was.
I'm not 100% sure that that's true yet. We'll see. I mean, I asked for a review code, and they're like, we're sending it to you. So it would be nice if we could get it a little earlier so we can talk about it with you guys before you guys decide to plunk down your money for it. So let's see what else. What other notes do I have about Devil May Cry? The combat's great. I mean, it's easier to get like higher ranks for each skirmish, but it just feels fun. The flow of it feels great. I feel like it is a little maybe too similar to at least the last two games, particularly the last one.
DMC?
No, not DMC.
4.
Devil May Cry 4.
It is very
I don't
similar to
count
4.
DMC as like a part of the franchise proper.
Well, canonically, it's not. I mean,
Right.
it's still Devil May Cry, but like it's not in continuity or anything.
Yeah.
But it's very different from that because DMC did not use lock-on
Right.
very much. So
Yeah.
it's like you could play that game without using the lock-on hardly at all. Trish.
Yeah. Devil May Cry 4 was hard. There were some
Yeah.
parts I had to fight some of those battles like almost 10 times to get through them.
Yeah.
And I faced nothing like that in this so far. Like even the boss that was in the demo that I could not beat in the demo, and mostly because if you died, you had to start the whole thing all over again, and I just didn't want to do it. In this one, I beat him first try in the final retail game. Also, they have an interesting way in how they handle death. So you die, but once you die, you have a choice of what you want to do. So you can spend red orbs to revive yourself, or you can use what's called a gold gem to revive yourself. So when you go to Nico's van, there's stuff that you can buy, and then you can upgrade stuff, and she'll give you stuff too. Like she'll give you new devil triggers that you can attach to your arm. Because you bring her back stuff, and then she uses that stuff to build the new devil triggers. But you can also go in there and just buy stuff. And one of the things that you can buy is you can buy the gold gem, which is an extra life, which I think is for like 1,000 gold or something like that. And then you can buy health extensions with the red orbs. So you can increase your maximum health with the red orbs, or you can just buy an extra life, essentially. And so when you die, you're presented with the option. You can say, do you want to use a gold gem for an extra life, or do you want to buy your way out of it? So the first time you buy your way out of it in-game with red orbs, it's like 750 red orbs. The next time, it's like 1,500, and it just keeps doubling. So I think that's a pretty interesting risk-reward system. It's an interesting way to deal with death.
But if you don't want to do that, what do?
You basically start
over.
all over. Yeah. So there's you make some hard decisions at times.
And is there a microtransaction system in that?
There is. Yeah.
Like the gold gems you can buy
Yep.
with real money? Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yep. It's a single-player game, so it doesn't bother me that much. It's like only in competitive games does paid to win really bother me. If someone's just doing it on their own, if like I suck and I can't beat this, I want to spend $5 to beat it, I don't care.
Yeah, I remember when those were cheat codes.
Yeah, I know. When it was free. Yeah.
When your cheat code didn't require your wallet unless you wanted to buy the strategy guide.
Touche. So I'm loving Devil May Cry 5 so far. I think I may do a stream of it tomorrow. If you guys want to check it out further beyond what we've talked about today and what we've shown you as far as B-roll in the show, I think it'll be a fun game to stream because it's challenging enough that you'll get some some gusto from streamers who have to apply themselves to get through certain sections, but it's not so tough that you're going to have to sit and watch the person play the same section of the game like 20 times over. So I think this would be a good game to watch people stream. And I think tomorrow afternoon, depending on what's going on, I have a relative in town right now, depending on what's going on with that, I'm going to try to stream some of this tomorrow. But I highly recommend it. Obviously, if you like story in game, if you have the story cranked up really high on your game eval ratings, I would steer clear of this. If you love
unless this is the kind of thing you like.
Right, unless you like that kind of goofy, funny, Japanese, Japanglish type thing, that's got this in spades. So
yeah, for me, I mean, I don't dislike it completely, but it helps that like the gameplay is so
good,
top notch that like I don't need a story to pull me through it.
If the gameplay in this game were bad, I would absolutely not play this game. Like,
well,
I would not survive on the cinematics alone.
Well, then it would be called Shadows of the Dam.
Touche. Yes, it would.
Taste his big boner, everybody.
All right, so that's it. It's time for our trailer of the week. For those of you who are on the stream all the time, you know this is the time to get some questions in the chat. Also, I have some questions from Sifted.net. Again, if you were not here for the early part of the show, we started a thread in the Sifted forums where you can go and ask questions for GameFace. Most of you, like 99% of the people who watch GameFace, do not watch the stream, although we love you guys who do. Thank you very much for being a part of the show. It's great. But we wanted to have an outlet for people who cannot be on the live stream to ask us some questions, so we put a thread in the forum. So those of you who are watching this archive and you're like, man, I never get to ask questions on GameFace, now you can. But anyway, time for our trailer of the week. It was a huge week of trailers, but one game that's really caught my eye lately is Mortal Kombat 11, and I'm still in that honeymoon phase where anything they give me about that game, I just lap it on up. And they released a story trailer this week. Let's roll it.
I am Kronika, keeper of time. I guide the destiny of the realms. But my work's perfection has been tainted by Raiden's actions. I enlist all those who disdain the current course of history. By merging past and present, we may draw upon allies from both eras. I offer a greater empire in the new era. Will your Outworld armies defend it?
They shall.
Kotal Khan, we have common cause. Solving this temporal crisis, and in defeating Shao Kahn.
I will have my scouts track Shao Kahn.
Can't someone, anyone, explain to me what the hell is going on? Right? I've been in the future for a whole hour and I haven't seen one jetpack. Not one.
Came from rock bottom with nothing that I saw with wings. I am not stopping, I'm coming if it's more to see. Ignore the dream, now they gotta applaud the king. It's my ego trip, I'm hoping you enjoy the scenes. I'm a monster, yeah, you should be avoiding me. I'm a rebel without a council, wanna war with me. It's a war outside, you can run it,
Elder gods, the realms are in crisis.
Every being will be erased in a temporal Armageddon. Find Kronika's key and gain control of her hourglass. Only then will time's momentum be restored.
We've got to take out Netherrealm's army now, before Liu Kang can bring it here.
As my strength gathers, the new era draws ever closer.
So Matt, once Mortal Kombat 11 comes out, we're going to have to do a dumb off on GameFace where we decide which has the dumber story, Mortal Kombat 11 or Devil May Cry 5.
And you were worried about what story they had left to tell in that game. Come on.
Okay, before we get into the questions in chat, I want to get to the ones from the site. You guys have already posted some good questions. You also have made some funny statements in there. Here's one from Press Start Rick. Can you ask Matt what the release date is for Fuckity? And can he also release it on the Epic Games Store? I hope it's a shooter.
That's a Q2 2024 release.
Switch only.
No, it'd be perfect for the Switch. It would. Switch port now. But on the Switch, it will cost $10 more. But it will have an extra. But it will have it will have an extra fuck in the title.
Okay. No, it'll say Fuckity Deluxe.
Fuckity Defucks edition. That'll be what it is.
All right. First of all, I want to thank the people who waited.
Reggie's glad he retired now. We're taking over.
I want to thank the people who waited till the end of the show to subscribe via Twitch Prime. So J. Reed Vic and Justin Horman, thank you very, very much for doing that. In future episodes, if you guys can all wait at the end, we can be sure to recognize you guys. I do realize that some of you guys cannot sit here for the whole 3 hours and watch the show, so I totally get that. But anyway, let's get to the questions from the site first, and then we'll get to the stuff in chat. Let's see. The first one from one of my favorite usernames on the site, from Skimpy. IGN has announced that all of its gaming shows like GameScoop, Unlocked, and Beyond are going audio only. Why do you think this is? Is it purely to save money? Solo YouTubers managed to put quality videos out, so why can't IGN? Your production insight would be deeply appreciated. First of all, holy crap, I did not know this until he asked the question. And I had to ask
Did they just announce this or something?
You know what? I followed up with him on the question on the site, and by the time I had to leave, he had not replied back. So I had to ask him, I'm like, where did you hear this? I hadn't heard this at all. So I don't know. Skimpy, I don't think usually is on the stream, which is why he asked this somewhere else. But maybe one of you guys saw it somewhere and you got a link or whatever. So we don't know 100% if this is true, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
I don't know.
That's news to me.
Yeah.
But if it is happening, it probably would be to save money because it means you don't have to pay someone to be there to be doing audio and camera and lighting and all that stuff and editing, and to pay a video editor to put the whole thing together. And whereas with audio, basically you just need one of the people doing the podcast to know how to hit record on the mic, and
that's that.
Maybe you have someone edit it together later, but like most people are competent enough to do that, so you could maybe just make it the job of
editing audio is so easy.
You could just make it the job of whoever is assigned the producer on the podcast, and you're down to a one-man operation as opposed to what was probably a 4 or 5 man crew.
Probably more than that, because here's the thing about the way IGN was doing its shows. It was using a TriCaster. Mm-hmm. It had 3 cameras just like we have, and it cut through all the cameras as they discussed stuff. But they never ran gameplay footage, ever. Like, it was just always the talking heads. But here's the thing. So in today's influencer culture, I get that. You want your personalities to be on screen as much as possible. You want fans to resonate with them. You want them to go follow them on Twitter. That way when they're promoting stuff for IGN, it's all a big cycle. But that's what doesn't make sense, if this is true, about this, is you're taking their faces off of the screen. Mm-hmm. And if it's just audio, I don't know. I think in today's influencer culture, where you're trying to build people as brands, and not just you or I, if we were on our own trying to get a bunch of followers so we can build our brand, IGN's trying to have these people build a brand that they can then parlay into more people coming to IGN.
Because game news and game stuff like that is ubiquitous. You can get it anywhere.
Right.
So the only reason to go to a particular outlet is because you like the personalities.
Right. The people.
It is weird to me if they're going to eliminate all the video. Like if you weren't going to keep like one flagship show that still gets to have the host faces out there in the world. I don't know. Like it's
really weird.
It sounds like, some kind of cost-saving method, maybe like a way to sort of free up more of the editors up, because a lot of that's up in San Francisco. I think it'll free up the editors' time to do something else, which maybe means that they're going to condense the staff a little further, which means people got to stretch their time per day more, other than like spend. You don't have the luxury to spend that amount of time producing these things. Certainly happened to us a few times when the staff shrank here and there. We didn't have the option to go audio only because we were on television, but like. We shot video for the podcast we did for G4 Feedback, and that was 3 people doing it. 3 people who were completely uninvolved in the podcast that had to spend an hour
Shooting
and plus the setup and teardown time.
Yep.
Shooting that and putting it together and editing it, and that's not even including edit time. Like that's very expensive. That's time consuming and expensive. Like that's not a minor thing. And you do it all by yourself, but like
that's what I was getting at, is that IGN is too bloated. If they're really using 4 or 5, and I agree with you, that's probably what they're using. There's probably 4 or 5 people working on every one of those. So you have someone as the TD for the TriCaster, like Sam. But instead of just having the camera set up, they have like people at each camera.
Yeah.
For no reason. You don't really need them there. It's just in case something bad goes wrong.
You don't need a dynamic zoom when you're, just having talking heads hanging
And
around.
if you have a good TriCaster TD, like we do with Sam, you don't need an editor. No. When the show's done, it's done. And if you do a great pre-production, you have all your clips loaded up, and they're edited well, and they have dissolves in and out. It's done. The show's finished. That's why I paid all this money for a TriCaster, because I knew it would save me so much money in the long run.
Yeah, live
and
tape
it has.
is helpful if you're good enough to pull it off.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you don't have to be that good. That's the thing. It's like with the devices that they have now, it's like it makes it easy.
We could have a monkey over there.
No.
Who needs what Sam's doing? Yeah.
No, my point is, he's doing it by himself.
Right.
He's one guy. Like
he's doing what took a booth of 7 people when we were on television.
Right. Here's what I think is happening at IGN. This is I don't know. I haven't talked to anyone. I think that they're struggling to get where we are, Kind of Funny is, Easy Allies is, where you're just bare bones.
Yeah.
And maybe you sacrifice a little bit of that extra sparkle on your production, but the amount of money that you save doing that is way worth it.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering.
The other thing is like, I'm sure they have the metrics on it, and it's entirely possible that people just don't watch it.
That's possible.
They just listen to it.
I mean, that is entirely possible. I mean, their shows do pretty well on Sifted if you look at like all the podcasts that we put up. I would say their stuff is probably in the top.
Yeah, but even when I don't watch stuff like that very often, in part because.
Well, they don't run B-roll.
They don't, but also because like a lot of people that do that, like if I want to know what they think about something, I'll just text them.
Right. Yeah.
But like, I'm not going to sit through an hour-long podcast to hear what you think about Devil May Cry 5. I'm going to just ask you.
Right. Yeah.
But not everybody can do that, obviously. But like, when I do load one of those things up, like I maybe look at it twice.
Yeah.
At the beginning, I look
just let
at
it play in the background.
Just let it, and then I switch to another tab, or I play a game, or the idea, It is a fair criticism that a lot of the people that I've listened to on those shows, if I ran into them at a party, I would not necessarily recognize them because I just don't look at their face that much.
But I also think that the reason why you've learned to tune yourself out from that content is because you know there's nothing else but them just sitting there talking.
Yeah. Well,
so when you see it for the first couple minutes, you see, okay, he's wearing a Metroid shirt and this girl's wearing a Mario shirt, and you get the lay of the land. There's not much else to see after that.
Right.
So you know that. You've conditioned yourself to be like, okay, when I watch an IGN show, I watch the beginning so I can see everybody. I can see who's on the show. I can check out what they're wearing and what they're doing that day. And then after that, I'm just good listening to the audio. Mm-hmm. IGN's not incentivizing people to stick around and consume the video. I think and again, this is all my opinion. This is just me from my experience saying what I think is happening over there. And it could just all be bollocks anyway. It may not even be true. So I hope this story is true, or we're not wasting our time discussing it.
You do bring up the point that like you can do all this with yourself and one TriCaster operator. So the idea that if you have the equipment, the idea that you have to get rid of the video part just because you got rid of some people
doesn't
not really
add up.
Not really true.
It doesn't. But again, I think IGN is still...
Unless you got some kind of union problem you're dealing with.
I
don't think IGN is unionized just yet.
IGN is it's the biggest budget publication on the planet. It has not had to face what a lot of us have had to face, which is I can't afford to pay a guy $2,000 to cut a piece of video. I can't pay 3 camera guys to stand around and just watch the camera like we used to at GT. Like literally, when we recorded stuff at GT, we'd have camera. There would be a guy standing there. Like Rich Brown would stand there just in case something happened. Like at a certain point, you get over that and you sacrifice a little bit of the production values for the greater good, which is money that you can then use to spend on other things instead of people who just stand around staring at the viewfinder on the camera for 3 hours. So things are changing. The gear has helped a ton. people have helped a ton. Like, everyone's a predator now. Everyone knows how to shoot with a camera. Everyone knows how to edit now. Everyone knows how to record voiceover now. A lot of people like Sam can do all that stuff, plus be a TriCaster TD. It's just, everything's changing and evolving. And when you're in a big organization like that, sometimes you get stuck in patterns and ruts. And when you're dealing with like a big budget every year and you're afraid to make changes because they may take some of the budget, there's all this stuff that goes into it that could be why IGN is doing this, if it is in fact doing it. And we should probably move on in case that is not what's happening.
Well, they say the chat, Vincent and people in the chat seem to say they said it on the podcast this week.
Oh, they did?
So it sounds like it is happening.
Here's one from Beelzebub. Do you think Sony will respond directly to Xbox Game Pass, offering full downloads of subscription games emulated with their next hardware?
No. I think they're just going to keep rolling with PlayStation Now and hope that's enough.
Sony put too much money into PlayStation Now to not see it through and make sure that it ultimately is a success. I mean, hundreds of millions of dollars, which it completely overpaid if you ask me, but I think it probably could have built its own thing itself for less than that. But, I don't see it doing, well, I don't want to say never, because I think eventually everyone's probably going to have something like an Xbox Game Pass. Do I think it's going to come at the beginning or the launch of the PlayStation 5? No, I don't. I think PlayStation Now will be pushed hard at the launch of the PlayStation 5, and I think PlayStation's version of Game Pass maybe comes 2 years into the PlayStation 5 life cycle. I think a lot of it depends on how it does for Microsoft. I think Sony's going to sit back and let Microsoft learn the lesson, and if it appears that Microsoft is making a ton of money off of it, then I think Sony will acquiesce and decide to do one on its own. Do you have any take on that?
Not really. I don't intend to use that service for anytime soon. So
okay.
I think PlayStation Now does let you download some stuff.
I think it does. Yeah, no, it does.
PlayStation 4. I mean, anything that doesn't run natively on the PS4, you have to stream.
Yeah.
Like the older games.
Right.
But I think modern stuff you can just download it.
You should be able to. Here's the last one from the website from Ian McGar. Are reviews useless now? What's your opinion on fanboys reviewing games for big sites? Games like Kingdom Hearts and DMC5 are getting praised for being true to the originals, yet Crackdown 3 is getting slammed for the same reason. It's a good point. Easy Allies gave Kingdom Hearts and DMC big scores and still said they're like great PS2 games. Crackdown 3 plays like an Xbox 360 game, and apparently that's a bad thing.
I would argue that Crackdown and Devil May Cry are not on the same level in terms of what you're talking about in terms of the throwback element.
I would also argue Kingdom Hearts 3 is not on the same level as Crackdown 3 when you're talking about that. So you're definitely comparing apples and oranges here, bro. I hear what you're saying. You're right. It does seem like some franchises get away with, like, I brought this up with Breath of the Wild. Like, all along I said this about Breath of the Wild. If it didn't have the Zelda name, it would probably still be a good game, but it wouldn't be like greatest game ever. It would just be a pretty good open world action adventure or action RPG, depending on your perspective on that game. So I hear what you're saying. I think the instances that you brought up here aren't particularly apt.
It's just it's like Devil May Cry 5 is like getting to hold a favorite pet again that's been gone for a long time.
That's a good way to
and
put it.
Crackdown 3 is like someone dug it up and threw it at me.
No, Crackdown 3 is them digging up the dead dog.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Putting it on your porch.
Yeah. You like that, right?
You said you liked it.
You missed him. So we got him. Just like, yeah, that would be my horrifying analogy.
That is freaking great.
In other contexts, that's called the monkey's paw story.
Vincent's saying the podcast made it seem like studio time was the main cost. That's impossible. They own their studio.
Yeah, I don't know how.
Unless IGN just wants to shoot other stuff in the studio, which is possible.
That's possible, yeah.
I mean, it could be that there are other shows for like movies and TV.
Yeah,
and
I don't
stuff
know
like
a whole
that
lot
do
about
better.
Especially because I don't know where those are. If those are, I assume they're mostly San Francisco, which I would think they just have a place in their office for that. But if they want to try to branch out into something different, if they got that could be part of it. Is they want to. Yeah, they do have a video unit that's based in LA, but like that's the whole separate kind of wing that sort of is trying to deal with the video stuff.
They're just basically wiring footage and cutting it in LA, though.
Yeah,
they're still recording all the shows in San Francisco.
But like a lot of the production and a lot of that stuff is done here by people who are based in LA. It could be that they're trying to like move in a new direction with that or expand somehow, and that's just not the best use of their studio time anymore. It might not be a cost issue.
Yeah.
Or it could just be what they were told to tell us, and we don't know anything about what's actually happening, because that also happens with companies as big as that.
It's entirely possible. All right, let's get to some questions from the chat here. The folks who decided to show up with us on a Friday night. Hope you guys are having a good Friday night. We have to answer W. Matthews' question as always. For once, not a game question. What do you think of Critical Role's Kickstarter? They have raised, link deleted, for an animated special being done by a TV animation studio.
Well, they've made like something like $8 million on it, right?
They've made $8 million?
It was some
Wow.
absurd number in the millions. I'll look it up because I'm sure that was the link that he got deleted.
That's just mind-boggling. Mind-boggling. To just come up with an idea and just have people throw $8 million at you.
People loved a Critical Role, man.
Apparently.
6.6 million.
Holy crap.
Pledged of 750,000. So they were not asking for that much money to begin with.
Holy crap.
Do not underestimate how popular Critical Role is.
I don't even watch it or consume it at all.
I don't watch it all that much, but I watch it once in a while. But like the hardcore fandom on that is like
apparently
you wouldn't believe.
Holy crap! I think that's amazing. That's incredible. Like,
Critical Role is one of the best examples of sort of that parasocial relationship that develops with like kind of internet celebrity and kind of the constant interaction they have, especially because they're performing an action that a lot of people play themselves, the D&D thing, pen and paper role playing. But they're also very talented, because they're all voice actors. They're talented at being able to sort of play these characters themselves and also sort of, make the story run, and it's become bigger and bigger and bigger, and they do a great job with it. It's a little surprising to me that they couldn't have found a way to pitch this to
a real studio
that would have then fronted the money to do something like this.
Yeah, so the fans didn't have to pay for it.
But clearly the fans were happy to do so.
Holy crap, man. I mean, are they on Patreon?
Yeah.
What is their account? It must be like $1 million a month. It's crazy.
I don't know if they are. I don't know, because their Critical Role is Geek and Sundry, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is, yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, Patreon has a Geek and Sundry has a Patreon. I don't think Critical Role has a separate one.
All right, let's get to some questions in the chat here. Some people are saying maybe Sekiro is short, and that's why they don't want people reviewing it early.
It's possible. I don't expect that game to be like 30 hours or anything.
Yeah.
It can't all be Ninja Gaiden 1.
That
game is really long for what it is.
It is. It's like 30 hours for a single-player hack and slash. Is there a happy medium between the Rockstar approach of complete secrecy and where game devs aren't handcuffed in public opinion to decisions that inevitably change during development? Would a game like Anthem be less divisive if people didn't have that reveal walkthrough for people to compare it to? So basically, the question he's asking is increased access hurting games? It's kind of what I said last week about like now people are playing games before they come out that weren't playing them in the past, and maybe they're not adjusting to it well.
I think it's a very fine line to walk. I don't think that this was captured on a real-time thing, little trailer that Anthem has helps it at all at this point.
Yeah.
But I also think the big backlash against Anthem it's as much of a time and place as it is Anthem itself. I think it's just Anthem sort of has ended up for whatever reason you want to pick. There's a bunch of them, but the Anthem has sort of ended up becoming an emblem of this kind of game, this kind of service, this kind of release, this kind of rushed to market thing, and it's just I think people are just using it as almost as like a totem of everything they don't like about this type of game.
Yeah.
And it's just sort of catching that heat.
Yeah.
Not just because of its own flaws, but because of everything people have had to put up with.
About the genre.
Everything people have to put up with of that subgenre for however many years, and they're just tired of seeing it happen over and over again, and Anthem was just sort of the breaking point.
I think they also maybe put their faith in BioWare that they would be the ones
that certainly hurts it too. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's definitely the fact that it's made by a company that is sort of someone we could trust until recently, I guess would be, it's the core team. It's a perfect storm of bad luck and poor decision making that has just finally broke.
Come to a head.
You know, it's just ironically enough, considering the the heart of rage has occurred, and it was Anthem. Like,
well, I don't know. It could be worse in the future. Who knows?
Well, it's going to be interesting to see how the Division 2 launches.
Yeah.
And if they can.
I mean, I played the beta. The Division 2 pretty on lock.
If they can get that smooth and make it something that people can point to in comparison to Anthem and say, like, why isn't this like this?
And I have a feeling it might be.
I think it probably will be.
Yeah.
I mean,
But Ubisoft's already been through it, you know. It already took its.
Ubisoft knows what they're doing. I mean, it's Division
lumps,
2.
yeah.
Division 1 didn't launch perfect either.
Yep.
Didn't launch like Anthem, but it didn't launch perfect.
Yep.
And they also learned, like from what they're. I already have people I know who play the beta. I didn't play the beta. I have friends I know who played the beta, who were skeptical about it or were kind of sick of the Division, but they played it just to give it a shot. And like one guy was like, I headshotted and killed a boss. Like, they are not bullet sponges anymore.
Yeah.
Like, they turn them around. I have had enough of Tom Clancy's Tom Clancy Presents Tom Clancy for one lifetime, probably. But it feels like the Division 2, they are trying to move it forward and learn from their mistakes.
Yeah.
And Anthem feels like it didn't learn from anyone's mistakes. And made several new ones. So
yep.
I think you're just looking at a perfect storm of about 3 different angles that is. And part of it is that sort of, that expectation setup thing. Rockstar does benefit from not doing that, but at the same time, you could argue that Rockstar can get away with not doing that because people just flock to them no matter what.
Yeah.
Like, Rockstar being the 800-pound gorilla also means they don't have to be transparent about it.
Rockstar also takes 8 years to make its games.
Yeah.
It's like comparing anything to Rockstar, I just don't think is particularly fair. But
Rockstar is a bit of a unicorn.
Yeah.
Yes.
Here's one from Justin Horman. How cheap does the discless Xbox One need to be to make sense? Would it need to be cheaper than $200 because the Xbox One S has already been that low? So he's talking about... So let's clarify. We spoke last week on the show about, or maybe it's the week before, about how the next Xbox was going to have 2 versions. There's going to be a hardcore version that has a typical console. There's going to be another version that's going to be basically a streaming console. But what's developed over the last week is that there's going to be an update to the existing Xbox One that does not have a disk drive at all. And that's coming out like this year sometime, like middle of the year. So he's asking about that, about the Xbox One diskless console is coming out this year. So what do you think the pricing is right for that?
My guess is the pricing is going to be the same as the S, but the hard drive in it is just going to be a lot bigger.
Yeah. I don't think they'll go below 200.
No.
Because, in all honesty, a disk drive, it's not worth that much money. I know people may think about it, then it should be $50 cheaper. When you buy drives in bulk, they cost like $2 or whatever. It's them taking the drive out of the hardware is not cheapening their production cost all that much. So I would say best case scenario $175.
Yeah, I would
more
think,
likely $200. They'll increase. They have to increase the size of the hard drive.
Yeah, because you have no other. I mean, the irony there is you have no other storage option with the disc one either.
Right.
Because they install the whole game to the disc. It's the same.
Right.
It's the same hard drive usage either way.
Yeah.
But the perception would be that you'd get more value by having a larger hard drive after taking the disc out, and hard drives are cheap too, so it would be about the same cost trade-off for them.
Yeah.
That would be my guess, because I also think that's how they'll price the next system too, because you don't want to tempt people into one or the other because one's cheaper.
Yeah, Nintendo did that with the Wii U.
Yeah, but
they had the 8 gig version and then the 30 gig version.
Yeah,
that worked out well. What all ended up happening was the cheap version was everywhere.
Sat on shelves until it rotted, basically. Yeah,
and probably got sent back to Nintendo.
I give you 3 guesses where all those refurbished gamepads came from.
Right. That's exactly where they came from. They were never refurbished. They were never sold in the first place.
They were just taken out of the box.
Yep.
Yeah.
From Vincent, if Labo VR does really well, is it a good thing or bad thing for VR as a whole?
I don't know. I would think anything that gets VR into the hands of more people is probably a good thing.
But then there's the whole thing of if it's such a bad experience, it could turn people off to VR as a whole.
True, but that would be out of character for Nintendo, in my opinion. If it didn't work pretty well, I don't think Nintendo would put it out.
Well, there was the Virtual Boy.
Yes, and they learned from that. I mean, look, it's not like any great shakes, but it's like Google Cardboard wasn't all that different.
I will say this, with the number of young people and parents that play Nintendo platforms, you're getting kids at 6, 7,
Yeah.
8. I mean, it really could. If they get sick, like I get sick on VR, it could turn them off for life.
Yeah, or it could, if they don't get sick, it could be like, oh, this is great.
Revelation,
yeah. It could be a gateway drug, or it could be the end of the road before it even begins. Yeah, but it's like
No matter what, it can affect it on a whole, though. VR on the whole.
It could.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like it's more likely to affect it positively than
Because
anything
just
else.
trying VR.
Just try it out, see how it is. This is cool. Maybe we should, step it up again. But like, the fact that it's cheap and you don't really lose a huge investment from it is probably, you pay $20 and little Susie gets violently ill when she tries to play, VR Mario Kart. Oh well, like that we wasted that afternoon, but now you know not to.
It's gonna happen too. Because I have a feeling that VR is gonna be awful.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see what I assume.
How does it even work?
Well, it's just like Google Cardboard. You put the thing in it's a two-piece thing with the lenses, and you put the thing in it, and they're going to divide the screen, and you look at it. It's like a ViewMaster.
So you're still going to have depth perception with it, though?
Oh, yeah.
Without two...
I mean, as long as the
Without it
game
being
is
rendered twice?
As long as the game is designed for it. I mean, you're probably only going to be able to use it with whatever software comes with it.
Right.
Like I'm joking about the Mario Kart thing. I don't think that's going to be a thing. It's going to be like the Labo stuff where everything's sort of a self-contained game you play.
Labo, by the way, $20 for 2 pieces of cardboard.
And the lenses. It's not.
There's lenses
It's
in
like
there?
a lens thing. Yeah,
Oh,
it's
I
like
didn't know
a
that.
plastic lens piece.
Oh, okay. It's still pretty steep. All right, we'll answer 1 or 2 more. Derek D111, how would you guys rate or rank the online video game marketplaces? Xbox Live, PSN, Steam, iOS, Nintendo, online.
Rank them?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Let's start with the worst first.
Worse in what sense? Like UI or like?
Just rank them.
I don't know.
Whatever you want, whatever parameters you want. I'm gonna go.
I don't really have a preference.
I'll go eShop.
Worst.
Then I think he has them in order. I think he's got them right in perfect order, reversed. Worst is eShop. Next is iOS. Next is Steam. Next is PSN, and Xbox Live is the best. Now, maybe I'd bump Steam above PSN. I don't know. Maybe. But otherwise, I think the list you have there is pretty accurate.
I don't.
I would just say I'm ranking them based upon overall customer satisfaction.
It would never occur to me to care. Really.
I don't know. You complained about the eShop earlier about how you couldn't find anything.
Yeah, well, because it's all just choked with garbage, but like so Steam. I mean, I think they're all kind of mediocre in terms of navigation and UI, and most of them move too slowly. And
I'll agree with that.
Frankly, I'd rather I just go in and I find the thing and I buy it and I leave. Like, it's like Walmart. I don't want to be there any longer than I have to, but it sure takes a while to get where I need to get to because it's big and slow.
I think that might be it. A lot of people are applying.
There isn't like a digital storefront where I think of where I'm like, I enjoy browsing that. Like there isn't anything like that. I think they're all kind of terrible in their own way.
I'm guessing a couple people want to hear your impressions of Captain Marvel.
I liked it a lot. I have been a not Captain Marvel. I've been a Ms. Marvel, Carol Danvers fan since I was about 3 or 4. Because my first comic books were my cousin gave me a big stack of old comics from the 70s he didn't want anymore, and a bunch of them were some of them were old Ms. Marvel, some of them were Marvel Team Up that she was in a couple of those. So Marvel Team Up was a 70s series, Marvel series that was Spider-Man. Every issue was Spider-Man teamed up with a different character, and I was introduced early on to some of the weirdest, most esoteric Marvel characters because of that. So when I was a kid, I was like, the characters I knew as like these characters from the Marvel team. I knew Mockingbird and Dr. Demonicus and Batroc the Leaper, who showed up in the Winter Soldier, which I could not believe.
That's crazy.
He's the guy who does all the fighting with him on the ship at the very beginning.
Wow.
The French guy.
Yeah.
He's a French master of savate who wears a big purple and yellow costume in the old comics, and like if you look at the movie, he's got like purple and yellow on his suit. And I was like, I cannot believe Batroc the fucking Leaper was just in a film I saw.
Great.
Brother Voodoo, like a bunch of weird stuff like that. And Ms. Marvel was one of the team ups in that, and I thought she was really cool. And I like Carol because she's like an Air Force pilot, and like she ended up with cosmic powers and all that. So I've been kind of waiting for a Carol Danvers movie for like 40 years, and I was worried because in the trailers I didn't feel like Brie Larson really quite captured.
I would agree with that.
Like she seemed a little sleepwalky.
Yeah.
In the final movie, it's much better. She gets a little more personality to show like never trust the trailers on things to show you what something's about. She is a little like, because she doesn't have her memories throughout the movie and she's sort of discovering who she is. She's a little blank in places,
literally and figuratively.
But there's stuff like early on, there's a fight with a bunch of Skrulls, and the Skrull does the monster, alien monster thing where he goes rah, and she goes rah, like it hits him out of the thing, which like she kind of won me over with that.
Yeah.
There's a scene where she's like trading jabs back and forth with Fury, and like really felt like Carol Danvers. Like she really felt like the character, and then she kind of goes back to more of the muted version as like kind of the movie continues. But there's a quick moment there I'm like, okay, like I recognize that character, and she's a different Carol Danvers from what the comics are. They reinvent these characters for the Marvel movies, and that's fine. But it was different, but good enough for me.
On the level with stuff like Avengers and Black Panther.
No, I would say it's kind of B tier Marvel.
Okay.
I've A tier Marvels like Infinity War, Black Panther, the original Iron Man, which I still think is great, stuff like that. So this is kind of level 2. It's good. It's good. Sometimes it's great, but it's not like, oh my God, it's one of my favorite Marvel movies. It's not Thor: The Dark World.
Captain America movies are pretty good.
Oh, the Winter Soldier and
I
Civil
think
War
Winter
are way
Soldier
up there.
may be one of the best.
I mean, my favorite is still Avengers 1 because it was special to me because, like, that was the comic book was on the screen.
Right,
Like it was like I never thought they'd do it. I never thought they'd pull
I hear
it
you.
off.
There was definitely an awe factor there.
But I would say Winter Soldier is probably the best film of the whole Marvel series.
Yeah.
It's the best made movie, I would say.
Yep. So you're telling people to go see?
I think it's really good. It's great to see Sam Jackson as Fury in a whole movie again.
Right. Instead of just like a cameo.
The de-aging tech is amazing. Like you don't even think about it after the first scene or so. It's just young Sam Jackson.
Wow. We need some of that.
Fury. Fury as like an embarrassing cat person is great. He loves the cat. He just turns it. He's like, I'm going to carry the cat. Good kitty. Good. Yeah. And like, of course, the cat's an alien thing, but like. It's a Goose. The cat is great. It's interesting that Goose is named Goose because in the comics his name was Chewie because he looked like Chewbacca.
Right.
But that name came about in the 70s when Star Wars was a thing, and in this it's supposed to take place in 1995, and no one was making Star Wars references in 1995, but they were making Top Gun references.
Yeah.
So it was actually a pretty smart move. There's a little girl in it, 11-year-old daughter of her best friend whose name is Monica Rambeau. The mother is Maria, and the daughter is Monica. In the comics, that's the other way around. But Monica Rambeau is one of the other Captain Marvels. She's most prominently in Next Wave recently, which is a kind of an edgier series. But that character, the 11-year-old girl playing Monica, that is absolutely Monica Rambeau as an 11-year-old girl. Wow. And the reason I think they made her the daughter in that is because if you then jump forward 20 years to the modern Marvel movies, you could have an adult Monica Rambeau.
Right.
In that mix, and I hope they do that because they nailed her in this. It was great. Ben Mendelsohn plays the Skrull leader of bad guy, and he is one of the best villains in Marvel history.
Wow, good.
He's great, and it doesn't go where you think it is. Think it's going to go. I enjoyed a lot of it.
What about post movie? What extra scenes are there?
There's 2 extra scenes. There's one at the end of the first kind of main, the mid credits thing, and there's a gag thing at the very, very end of all the credits.
So stick around.
So stick around for that. And it is interesting because I think the mid credits scene is just a clip from Endgame, Avengers Endgame, which usually means that whatever they were going to shoot for the original end credit scene didn't work. The last time they used just a clip from the next movie was Age of Ultron, and that was because whatever thing Whedon was going to do for that, they didn't like it or they didn't do it.
Interesting.
The other thing is get there on time. Get there to see the opening, the Marvel logo. When the beginning where the pages all flip and the Marvel logo, Marvel Studios logo. Yeah. Make sure you get there early enough to see the Marvel Studios logo on this one.
You also got made to make sure you get there early so you can see the Anthem commercial crash.
Yeah, that's also fun. There's a couple of good trailers too.
Yeah.
including the Spider-Man Far From Home trailer. That movie looks great.
Yeah.
But yeah, make sure you get to see the Marvel logo on this one because it's
something we're seeing.
It's if you're a fan.
I think I have a good idea of maybe what happens after recent events.
Yes.
Yeah. That's what I thought.
So make sure you see that one.
All right.
So yeah, I liked it a lot. It's not top tier Marvel, but it's it's really good.
It's worth your
a good
10 to
time.
$15.
If you like '90s stuff, there's tons of '90s references all over the place. I think the music went a little overboard in places. Like, not everything has to be Guardians of the Galaxy.
Right.
Also, I wonder if there's a difference there because like Guardians of the Galaxy is using like kind of '70s rock, where like I just sort of associate that with sort of like slightly ancient great music, whereas I have specific lifetime memories of every '90s song in this movie, and I'm like, that's not what this is. That's when this happened, you know. And like, so I feel like I have more like kind of like concrete experience like that I associate with these '90s songs, whereas like the songs that Guardians uses are a more nebulous sort of like, sure, that could be in space. I don't know.
Yeah.
But like, there's a couple moments in Captain Marvel where they use a particular '90s song, and I'm like, that's a little on the nose, guys.
Yeah.
So, but overall, I had a really good time. Outside of the guy who sat down next to me and started texting for the first 10 to 15 minutes of the movie.
And is he one of those idiots that has like the sound on when he pecks?
No, he actually had it down. He had the light down real low, but it was still there, and like everyone
No
around.
offense to any of you who have that turned on, but turn it off.
Turn it off. Yeah. Everyone around him was just like, "What the fuck is that?" And I'm like, "Put it away, put it away." And like finally, the guy, so the guy on the other side just whacks him in the chest and goes, "Put it away or go away." And like the guy turns to me like as if to say like,
what's
like,
wrong with that
to get
guy?
my opinion. I'm like, put it the fuck away. And he finally got up and left.
That's great.
But the first like 10, 15 minutes was, and by the way, that was the seat that I had refunded because I had 2 tickets.
Oh,
and then,
he got your seat.
He got my old
and
seat.
Acted like
but
a
I
jackass.
offered it to another friend of mine, and he was kind of maybe, but then he decided not to because he'd rather stay home and play Apex Legends. And I'm like, you ruined the first 15 minutes of the movie for everyone around me because you didn't take that extra ticket.
All right, we got to get out of here.
So always be social. Otherwise, you'll ruin movies for people because you never know who's going to buy that ticket. I should have just ate the $20 and had no one next to me because that is always better than some rando showing up.
Now you know.
Anyway.
And no one's half the battle.
Also, if you can, see it in IMAX because the action scenes expand out to fill the IMAX screen, which is cool.
There you go. All right, that's going to do it for GameFace 159 here on Sifted Games at Sifted.net. YouTube folks, hook us up with that Twitch Prime.
The guy who didn't come is apparently watching because he just texted me.
No way.
He's like, I got a shout out. I'm like, yes, you did.
That's great.
Yes, you did.
If you're watching on YouTube, hook us up with Twitch Prime, folks. It's down in the description. It's very easy to do. All you guys who are watching us live, you guys are all awesome. Your subscribers, your patrons, you guys rock. Hope you guys have a great weekend. Thanks for hanging out with us on a Friday. GameFace is up and out.